customer always right? The Times-Union reported this morning that a local Home Depot employee was fired after what he considers some pretty nasty verbal abuse from a customer. This was a 60-year-old black man who says the abuse was racist and unlike anything he'd ever experienced. And tonight, he's still shocked he was fired over it. When Maurice Rucker was working at the Albany Home Depot last Thursday, a customer approached the checkout with an unleashed dog. So Maurice tried to be a good employee.
I said to him, I said, "Sir, when you have your dog in here, we prefer that you keep it on a leash." He turned around and said, "F you, you're a piece of..."
Maurice was understandably shocked, but it was just the start of a barrage of insults, some of them racist.
He says if Trump wasn't president, you wouldn't even have a job. Like, I've worked, and he said, "You're from the ghetto, what do you know?" I've lived all over the country, and I've had no one talk to me the way that this guy talked to me.
Finally, Maurice couldn't help but say something to him.
"You're lucky I'm at work, because if I wasn't, this wouldn't be happening, or you wouldn't be talking to me like this."
The man left, then came back because he forgot his dog, insulted Maurice again, and was gone. That incident with the customer happened last Thursday, and when Maurice responded to work this Tuesday, he was informed he was being fired. Seems to be a pretty drastic step to take given his long-term employment with the company, and that he says he was just named Cashier of the Month. I contacted Home Depot, and spokesman Stephen Holmes told me Rucker did not follow protocol for dealing with an angry customer, saying the problem here is that he had several opportunities to disengage and contact management to deal with the customer. We're appalled by this customer's behavior, but we also must require associates to follow proper protocol to diffuse a situation for the sake of their safety and the safety of other associates and customers. Maurice says managers told him the customer called to complain about him.
He said that I was being racist.
That you were?
Yeah, that I was being racist, and that I said that I would knock him down. And he just like told them a bunch of lies, and it seems like they believed him.
Well, after 10 years with the company, Maurice says he was making less than $13 an hour. He said he's considering contacting an attorney. Looking forward, he hopes to find a job working with children. Among his duties at Home Depot was running the kids' workshops.
Well, explain to me why you want a white dentist all of a sudden.
Because I want the best available dentist for my tooth. That's why. Now, just by coincidence, the best dentist schools are of the white people, by the white people, and for the white people. Now, don't it seem likely that the best dentist would be white? White dentist, please.
Race, gender, work, and inequality form the core of sociologist Adhere Harvey Wingfield's research. She's a sociology professor at Washington University, and her latest study looks at those topics in the context of the medical field and a rapidly changing economy. St. Louis Public Radio contributor John Larson recently spoke with Professor Wingfield about her research for her forthcoming book. It's titled Flatlining Healthcare Work, Race, and Inequality in the New Economy.
My current project is a look at black healthcare workers. I was interested in trying to think about how a lot of changes in the economy and changes to how we work had an impact on black professionals specifically. And healthcare seemed like an industry that's obviously undergoing a great deal of change and restructuring. So I thought it would be a really useful site for trying to understand how black professionals in a field that's changing were experiencing these shifts that are happening with work.
What are you finding?
So a lot of interesting things. The main argument that I make in the forthcoming book is that for black healthcare workers, efforts that organizations are making to try to focus on issues related to diversity aren't necessarily going far enough, and they're not necessarily reaching a broad variety of workers. One of the things that I think is interesting about the book is that I look at black doctors, nurses, technicians, and physician assistants, and their experiences with race in the workplace differ depending on what sort of job they're doing. And what I'm finding is that organizational attempts to address black workers' experiences often paint with a pretty broad brush and don't necessarily take into consideration how those experiences can change depending on what sort of job the professionals are working in.
Well, you think of a medical doctor as running the whole show. What kind of challenges would a black doctor have?
So interestingly, for black doctors, it varies by gender in some ways. Broadly speaking, for a lot of black doctors, the challenges that they experience are not really the sort of kind of everyday experiences with discrimination that might be the sort of overt things that we might think about for black doctors. They talk to me a lot more about more structural or cultural biases, these ideas that they have to really go out of their way to prove themselves to people who might assume that they aren't qualified or competent, or the barriers that keep doctors or keep people of color out of the medical profession in the first place. So disparities in education, disparities in lack of funding that allows people to undergo the very expensive training that's required for medicine. For Black women, though, a lot of their challenges were much more stark when it came to issues related to gender. Pretty much every Black woman doctor that I spoke with talked about being mistaken for the nurse or being called Miss instead of doctor, even after introducing themselves as doctor. So for them, the sort of structural barriers that make it difficult for Black doctors were present. But when they thought about the everyday challenges that they encountered in medicine, it was definitely things that were related to these experiences of being a Black woman doctor specifically.
I suppose it makes it even more difficult then for them to go into private practice?
Well, for a lot of Black professionals, I found that many of them actually are more interested in the public sector work because they are focused on wanting to address racialized health disparities and serve the populations that they see as being the most in need. And in many cases, the public sector is where we treat the patients who economically have the least. This is where we see the highest numbers of poor Black, Latino, Asian American patients who may not have private health insurance and have to rely on public facilities. So many Black doctors were actually driven to that sector, but they also talked a lot about how the under-resourcing of the public sector has really made their jobs a lot more difficult. For Black doctors who did go into private practice, they were able to escape some of those resourcing challenges, but still often dealt with the structural barriers that I spoke about, and for Black women doctors in particular, often dealt with still this challenge of not being perceived to be someone who was qualified or suited for medicine because of their status as women.
Is the majority of that pushback coming from white patients and white peers?
In some cases, yes, but not exclusively. I did speak with some doctors who talked about particularly older Black patients who I guess were more accustomed to an earlier era where there were even fewer Black doctors than there are now. But in most cases, when respondents talked about encountering patients who didn't trust them or didn't really believe that they could be doctors, those typically were more likely to be white patients.
When you were doing your research, were you looking at illness and disease that was adversely affecting the African American culture? And did you find any ties between having a Black doctor was more of an insurance policy against some of these diseases and illnesses?
Right. I didn't look specifically at health in terms of connections between race and disease and illness, but there is research that suggests that for patients of color and Black patients in particular, health outcomes can be improved by having doctors of the same race. And I think a lot of that stems from the somewhat contentious history that Black people have had with the medical establishment at large. We can think of kind of obvious examples like the Tuskegee experiment to show ways in which Black patients have been mistreated by the healthcare system and the ways in which I think that may have developed a collective memory that affects the ways in which Black people respond to and look at aspects of the medical establishment. So research does show that those connections do matter. I was looking more so at the experiences of Black workers in the healthcare system, but I did find that when it comes to these relationships between these groups and the ways in which Black patients may regard and be mindful of the ways in which Black practitioners might treat them differently, that Black healthcare workers were aware of that also. And that was something that was constantly at the forefront of their mind in terms of how they treated patients, particularly because in many cases they saw that their colleagues often did not offer Black patients, particularly Black poor patients, the same level of deference and courtesy. So they really were mindful of the ways in which their treatment could potentially offset the ways that they might be mistreated by white practitioners, and that could, at least hypothetically, have an impact on maybe psychosomatically combating some aspects of disease and illness that might be more prevalent in Black communities.
What interested you most about this?
You mean in coming into the project or in terms of my findings?
Your findings and the project.
Coming into the project, I wanted to think more about how changes to work were having an impact on Black professionals. And I wasn't really seeing a lot of that in most of the sociological research on work and inequality. There was a pretty decent older literature that talked about Black professionals, broadly speaking, but most of that was written before a lot of the major changes that have happened in our economy. There wasn't anything that looked at how Black professionals were experiencing work in a post-recession era or in a context of enormous income inequality, or to a lesser degree in an era where the public sector that has historically been an era where Black professionals could find comfortable, stable work has been steadily shrinking and eroded over the past several decades. So I wanted to think a lot about how those changes were having an impact on Black workers. What does that daily work experience look like when you're dealing with all of these structural changes and in an environment where, on paper at least, it looks like you've made it, so to speak, because you're in this professional job, but you're in this professional job where professional work itself has become a lot less secure, a lot less stable, and not necessarily the route to upward mobility that it had been in previous decades. So that was my initial interest in coming into the project. In terms of the things that were interesting to me about the findings, I think a lot of that had to do with the differences that I saw between occupations and seeing how much Black doctors' experiences could be very different from Black nurses' experiences, which then were very different from Black technicians' experiences. And I think that's important to give a much more nuanced view of both work and inequality and how that relates to race, because when we talk about Black professionals, I think there's a pretty sort of narrow window that we have of what that looks like, right? We might think of a few people who are examples of Black doctors or teachers or attorneys or what have you. If we look at current media, for example, we get shows like Blackish or Insecure that show us examples of a few Black professional workers, but we don't really get a clear look at how there's kind of a broad category of Black professional workers whose experiences may not necessarily all mirror each other and may not all be the same. So I found it really interesting to think about how even within this group of workers who would all be considered people who do professional work and have these white-collar jobs, there was still a lot of variance within that category and that their experiences didn't necessarily mirror each other.
If you had a magic wand, what's the fix?
Oh boy, I'm not sure I'm not sure the fix is a magic wand type of solution, but I do think that there are ways to address some of the issues that I learned about in my research. I think that organizations have to be a lot more nuanced and mindful about their attempts to recruit and retain workers of color. And I think that the current buzz for a while has been this talk about diversity and equity programs and talking about diversity and inclusion. But I think that research also shows that those programs have not been as successful as we might like them to be. So I think that organizations shouldn't begin and end with diversity work or diversity programs. What's probably more, if not equally important, if not more important, is thinking about how organizations may need to restructure or overhaul themselves to be more attuned to a broad array of workers that they have to employ. I also think that it's critical for workers to have more support and power and influence than they currently do. And I think one way, if we're thinking about policymakers and the role that they can play in this, is to be a lot more supportive of unions and collective bargaining. The numbers of workers who belong to unions has declined precipitously over the past several decades, but research also shows that when workers belong to unions, they can actually drive up wages for workers across the board, even those who don't belong in unions. And that historically, unions were kind of at this precipice of being able to create more racial equity before support for them began to decline pretty broadly. So I think those are a couple of steps that can be taken so that Black professionals, who are becoming a growing number of the demographics that are going to be critical in a more multiracial society, can work in environments that are more representative of their experiences and their needs, and therefore allow organizations to better serve a more multiracial population that we have now.
What has been your personal experience being a PhD, a doctor? Mm-hmm. Have you been called Miss Wingfield?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how does that feel?
You know, actually, it depends for me. I have some colleagues who are very strict about, I'm professor such and such, I'm doctor such and such, but I've had a wide experience with working in different educational environments. I have had some students who I think were just not familiar with the norms around higher education. And when it's from students where I can tell that they're freshmen and they're coming right out of high school and they're used to addressing their teachers as Mrs. Such and Such, for those students, I don't ascribe any malicious intent to it. The issues come, I think, when you talk to other colleagues who say, no, that student always calls me Professor such and such. That's weird that they refer to you as Miss or as Adhere. Well, then it's not weird. It's pretty clear that you're making an intentional decision to refer to my male colleagues as Professor such and such, but to feel as if we're on a familiar enough basis that it's fine for you to refer to me by my first name.
Does that surprise you that it's still happening?
No. Not at all. I mean, with the work that I do where my research focuses so much on issues related to work and racial and gender inequality at work, there's unfortunately very little that surprises me at this point.
Context of white supremacy. We should all be working to not be surprised about the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, July 26th, 2018. So I have been told. This is our weekly caucus. Neutralizing Workplace Racism. This is not a broadcast for spectators. I don't know about the weather in other parts of the plantation. Here in Seattle, it is a lovely, warm, sunny summer day. Could be outside, frolicking, doing lots of things. We are here addressing the serious problem of white supremacy racism, specifically in the area of people activity of labor. If we have folks that are listening, if you have a work history, if you have experienced problems, we certainly want to hear from you. If you have figured out codification so that you can minimize the types of problems that you experience on the job, certainly if you have figured out a way to completely eliminate so that you don't get falsely accused, you don't have whites calling you nigger on the job, you don't have any brawls about your time off, vacation days, sick leave, if you have a sick child, any of that. If you need a transfer, if you need to move your office, your desk, no problems ever for any reason. You get all your bonuses, all your raises on time, promotions, no problem. You should be the very first person to call in. The number 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. You can certainly email if you have, or if you do not have the ability to dial in, or if you don't want to call in, drop us an email untiljustice@gmail.com and we can read your commentary on the air. People did write in. I had thoughts on the audio segments that we heard as well. One thing I just wanted to begin with, I did my segment the other day to talk about what I've been going through with teacher training. That certainly would qualify for workplace racism. I just didn't want to take up too much time with that. But one thing that I will share that I did not discuss this past Tuesday, the broadcast, teaching yoga as a black male in the system of white supremacy. It's in the archives, which have been updated. The iTunes archives, the Black Talk Radio Network archives, the SoundCloud archives, all should be current. There were some difficulties getting things uploaded to iTunes, but that has been solved. You can refresh and get the current content. At any rate, yoga teacher training. I've said for years now, echoing the sentiments of Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., Mr. Edward Williams, and many others, the importance of knowing policy and procedure. If it's a classroom setting, they might have a policy outline for the class and then a syllabus, a course kind of outline. Know that material. If it's your job, look at that policy and procedure manual so that you know what the expectations are for folks that are going to be working on that particular job. With teacher training, we got a syllabus. We got a list of all the requirements with checks that you can go through as you check things off. And then we get like weekly email updates from the instructors, and they kind of let us know if we have homework or if there are other assignments that are due and what the plan of action is going to be for the week's classes. So last week we got this email, and the suspected racist instructor, she told us to answer like 5-6 questions from our teacher training manual that everybody has. I go through, answer the questions, not a lot of time, something that you could probably do in 10 minutes or so. So we get to class, and they put these questions up on the overhead or whatever, projector, whatever it is. So I'm looking at it, and I say, we already did this. This was a homework assignment. And the different instructor says, oh, no, we didn't do these already. And I look at the questions again, and I say, yes, this was, just a homework assignment. I already did this. And so he looks at it, and so he says, so did anybody already answer these questions? So I put my hand up. White female behind me raises her hand. Nobody else in the class. He says, okay, well, it seems most people didn't do it anyway, so we'll do it. And while all of this has been going on, other people in the class, I'm the only black male in the class. There's only one other non-white person. So while this has been going on, the other whites in the class are speaking up and saying, oh, I never saw this. I've never seen this before. This wasn't assigned. I didn't do this. No problem. So we continue. Everyone else is doing this assignment, I guess, for the first time. I'm not doing anything because, as I stated, we already did, or at least I already did this. This was assigned, already did this. So the instructor, he starts going back and looking through his email to see if he can find it. So about 5 minutes later, he speaks up and he says, okay, guys, this was assigned for us to do. These questions were not listed explicitly, but it was given that we were supposed to go to this page in the manual and answer the questions. If you go to that page, these are the questions that are on that page. So Gus was, in fact, correct. We were supposed to have already done this, but since most of you did not do it, you can go ahead and do it now, and cool point or whatever he said for Gus. The reason I bring that up pretty consistently, that is the position that you're going to have to be in, or to strive to be in, as a victim of white supremacy, because so many times things are not being done in a correct manner, and things are explicitly, deliberately, willfully being done in a manner to mistreat black people in particular. So really make sure that you are mindful about the details. And it happened again even yesterday, because we didn't follow what was on the syllabus. We had a whole different course outline, and people were looking confused and everything. And then finally someone asked at the end, and the instructor has a completely different syllabus from the syllabus that we have, with totally different assignments for like the next 3 or 4 classes from what our syllabus has. But anyway, just making sure that you are really observant, informed, competent about policy and procedure, so much so that you are aware, acutely so, when we have deviated from what we are supposed to be doing. This is what it's supposed to be. That's not what it is now. And then you can decide how you want to address that situation. Leaving the yoga behind. Workplace racism, although that definitely applies. With regards to some of the audio segments that were shared, that very first segment, the black male at Home Depot who was fired because some race soldier came in with a canine that was unleashed, and the black male employee just told him about their policy. You know, hey, you're supposed to have the dog on a leash, and this race soldier begins calling him a nigger and becomes belligerent, directly terroristic. And they end up firing the black male, saying he didn't follow procedure because he responded or said something to the customer, and that's not what they're supposed to do. That is an illustration of why I emphasize on the program. And this is not saying that that black male did anything incorrect, but it is saying that whites, them practicing racism, again, that's not something that we should be surprised about, stunned about. We should expect that. How we respond, huge with regards to workplace racism, and we really got to make every effort that we can. I know it's difficult. It can be really challenging for everybody, including myself, but really making an effort to control our emotions so that we can stop, think. Really, in those sort of situations, I would encourage distance immediately. Once they've come out and said nigger, and I've said this even if you're not on a job, once you got whites yelling nigger and that sort of thing, violence could be seconds away. I would be trying to exit that area. If you're in a workplace situation, I would go get the manager immediately. This person here is making terroristic threats. They called me a nigger, threatened violence, or whatever else they did, and I don't feel safe. Emphasis on safety. I don't feel safe. This person is threatening me. I feel that my life could be in jeopardy, and let them take it from. Do the enforcement officials need to be called? That's another one. Invoke Mr. Williams. Enforcement officials need to be called, and that's it. I don't have anything else to say to him. Might not have anything to say with him at all. In fact, if a white person has got to the point and they're calling you a nigger on the job, nothing to say at all. Exit, write that down, and whatever protocol, whatever procedure that you have, if you want to ask that person a question, that's fine, but I would have as little to say as possible. With the whole situation, you can just think. Because if you want to ask a question, In my view, sometimes that works even better. If you take a minute or what have you, so it's not an immediate thing, you can wait a little bit and then ask you a question so that everything is calm. It wasn't he was flipping out and belligerent and asking me. Nope, there was a delay. He waited. Seemed like he or she was thinking for a bit and then calmly asked the question, if that's the route you want to go. But it should be very deliberate, very precise if you say anything at all under those circumstances. And all for a dog to I'm not a pet fan at all. If we have dog listeners out there, or listeners who are dog owners, dog lovers out there, Gus T is not in your lot. Next, now the segment that was talking about how black professionals, put that in quotes, are treated on the job. So many things stood out. I cannot deal with anything that talks about the medical profession and the system of white supremacy without mentioning the great Harriet A. Washington, medical apartheid. And I really need to emphasize that on this one because it is so much larger than Tuskegee. Yes, that is an important illustration of white terrorism. Absolutely. That is not the only one. And if we're going to talk about black people and whatever issues or problems are arising with regards to the medical field in 2018 or any other era of white supremacy, let's make sure that we do not present this as though whites terrorizing black people under the guise of being doctors, nurses, physicians, whatever it is. Let's not make it seem as though that is an antiquated, outdated practice. That's still going on. If we want to talk about Henrietta Lacks or any other number of situations where black people, Dr. Vanessa Grubb, she was on the program talking about the disparity in organ transplants for black people in particular. We've had so many people on the program. I said Dr. Vanessa Grubb's, her book, Hundreds of Interlaced Fingers. Dr. Dorothy Roberts, Killing the Black Body in Gus's Top 10. She's been a 3-time guest on the program. Vernelia Randall, Dying While Black. We've had so many different individuals on the program to address this issue. This is not something that's old. Whites are doing this all the time. Even more than that, the medical field and racism is something we've covered extensively over our decade of broadcasting. But things that were addressed in that clip, it stood out to me in a very glaring manner because we've invested so much time covering this topic. When they began talking about racism and sexism, ended up being pulled in gender analysis. I did not hear a gender analysis for black males. Now, if I missed that in the clip, you all can point that out. I heard black doctors, and then it pivoted to black female, either doctors, or she was talking about her own experiences, or other black female healthcare professionals. I did not hear anything that was specific to this is what black males experience, and then this is what black females experience, or this is what black people in general experience. I heard black doctors, black medical professionals, and then black females in their experience. Certainly, I'm sure black females experience racism, white supremacy in a myriad of ways that I do not know, but I'm also very sure that those black male professionals are experiencing white supremacy racism also in a very different way that I might not know about. And I have direct examples of that because we had Dr. Augustus White on the program. He talked extensively about his career as a black doctor. He's a professor at Harvard in their medical school. We talked about his book and his history of going through medical school and how the racism he experienced. Also, a guest who was not on the context of white supremacy, but was talked about on the cows extensively. He did a segment on NPR in 2013 called For a Black Doctor, Building Trust by Slowing Down. This is Dr. Gregory McGriff. He didn't come on the cows, but I talked to him personally. We had a phone conversation. We exchanged text messages, the whole nine. He participated in NPR's Race Card Project. And what he wrote, you're supposed to use 6 words to write a sentence that's about white supremacy racism. His 6-word sentence was 55 miles per hour means you. Miles per hour means you. I think it was black boy. I have the report in front of me. They just don't have the whole sentence spelled out the way that he has it. But 55 miles per hour means you. Yep, I got it. 55 miles per hour means you, black man. I think it should have said black boy, but you get the picture. And he did this interview and he explained his abuse and how he's mistreated as a black male physician in North Carolina. Again, shout to Mr. Scotty Reed. And he talked about them calling him uppity. He used that word specifically in the NPR report about them calling him uppity because he used words that they didn't understand. These were white patients in North Carolina saying this, where he said he would have to talk really slow. And he said not talking down to them, but making sure that they could understand what he said. And just a lot of different things that he shared in the interview. It got really interesting because I played the segment and then I contacted Dr. McGriff to see if we could have him as a guest on the program. He contacted me and he said, I've received notice that I'm no longer going to be employed at the hospital after doing the interview with NPR. Not that I was surprised, be in the business of not being shocked, but okay, so we wait. And then I think a few weeks pass or what have you, and we actually talk on the phone, not just text. And he said that it had just been really difficult, that there was a big response by some of the whites on the job about the report, I guess the interview. They heard it and felt that he was accusing them of racism. And anyway, somehow that was able to be resolved and he was not terminated, but he was certainly hesitant about doing any more speaking up about white supremacy, racism, and his experience as a black male physician in the great state of North Carolina. This all happened in 2013. Talked about some of this as we rolled along. I would encourage anyone to go to NPR and get that report for a black doctor building trust by slowing down, where he gives some of the extensive detail on how he was abused. But it really stood out at me like, wow, the black male experience in all of this being ignored. In fact, Dr. Tommy Curry, many times a guest on this program, has said frequently and has criticized emphatically gender studies for consistently making or suggesting the way it's presented that only females have a gender, only females experience issues that are directly related to their quote unquote gender, that this does not happen to males, and specifically black males, in a system of white supremacy rife with black misandry. Continuing from that report, when they were talking about all the different abuses and what have you of black physicians and officials, nurses, all of that, which is totally true. Some of that's covered in Medical Apartheid and some of the other texts that we talked about. And they were saying that you would think things are better because you get to see more black professionals and you get exposure to content like Blackish and Insecure. I wanted to vomit. For a myriad of reasons. Again, I can invoke the spirit of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Reading is more important than watching television. Certainly, if your only options are going to be Blackish, which I thought should have been canceled instead of Roseanne, and Insecure, where I think the third season, even though that's supposed to be a what they call black entertainment on HBO, started by a black female, I think their third season is supposed to be focused on toxic black masculinity. That was the interview I just saw, that season 3 focused on not the system of white supremacy, but toxic black masculinity. Anyway, the other aspects from the physician segment, I think it is extremely important just to repeat. If you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works, everything else that you do understand will only confuse you. None of this is happening. None of this is happenstance, and none of this is because white people are ignorant. And we certainly do not have a burgeoning multi-racial nation. There is one race in the system of white supremacy. That is a statement. Either it's true or it's false. In my view, it is extremely important in cutting through a lot of confusion, because once you start thinking, I'm a member of a race, even though I'm not white, confusion is lethal. There is one race, the white race. We are not multiracial. There's not a growing multiracial population. You have a system of white supremacy and a lot of confusion about what that is and how that works. With that, the number again is 641-715-3640. The code is 56494. #943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. We'll hit the phone lines and get the first few folks who dialed in if you have contact. I guess one more thing that I will share. I had a very productive day, got up early and was able to get a lot done. I didn't have any yoga today or teacher training, so I was just able to get lots of good things done, most of it focused around racism. I did pause and I had a conversation with the black female that I mentioned on the program earlier this week. We were talking about white supremacy, racism, and the logic of why it's incorrect for whites to engage in any sexual activity with non-white people. We talked about racism, white supremacy a lot, and somehow the conversation went to Atlanta. I only want to make sure that I get this on the record because this is something that I've talked about for years on the cows. I've mentioned before that I lived in Atlanta, so to hear her talking about Atlanta, she had the audacity to open her mouth and say, I've wanted to go to Atlanta. People have told me to go check it out. It's great, but don't go there looking for a mate. The ratio is 10 black females to every 1 black male. I almost had to stop and take a Kaepernick in the middle of the sidewalk to regather my thoughts and get myself together to hear that nonsense. I can only say, follow logic. There is so much confusion and nonsense that is promoted as gospel, sacred truth. That is one that is sticking. When Gus T Renegade is no longer on this earth, that will be a definitive one. The mythology that there are 10 black females to every 1 black male in Atlanta, that right there goes to the core of my experience on a planet dominated by white supremacy, racism, and total confusion that is spawned by that, where people say things that absolutely cannot be true, like first grade logic. This cannot be true, but it gets repeated ad nauseum as though it is sacred gospel. Incredible to be in Seattle on a lovely day and to hear that again. Getting back on track. Workplace racism. The number 641-715-3640. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. First few folks who dialed in, I have people who wrote commentary in as well. I have to read as we proceed. First few folks who dialed in, if you have comments you would like to share, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am. Our caller in the Bay Area.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. Yay, I'm on my way to work, so if you hear some whatever, it's because I'm driving. I'm the one that worked at the hotel. I was trying to figure out how to get out. I got an offer. Well, the people that I was working for at the hotel, the Caucasian male manager, because he was going out of town for another vacation, he decided to give me full-time, but I didn't know about it. I guess another Caucasian male that I worked with, he knew. So he told me it was something taped to the dryer because I do the laundry and the front desk. So he said, I think that's an offer for you to get full-time at benefits. Yeah, I just check it out. So I never checked it out. It's right above my sun visor. And I got another letter taped to the dryer with pictures that I never opened because I wasn't interested. It could have been telling me how to do what I've been doing for 2 years. Who knows? So the Caucasian male manager went on vacation. I applied for another job when I had this mediation meeting about how I'm not, I don't get along with the manager, or I'm not going above and beyond the call of duty to get along with the manager, but I get along with the staff. I applied for a job at Amazon. Not like it's any better, but it's getting me out of the hotel. So I got an offer for the 1st of June to start work, and that was my hire date. So I went to the hire orientation. So on the 1st of June, I put in my, since it's at-will employment, I just put in my letter of resignation that day, taped it, and gave it to, put it on the, above the manager's desk. He wasn't there, but the Caucasian female team lead was going to be there, so I just gave it to them and left. It was great because when the manager got back, he was so livid that I didn't work there anymore in the way I did it. He says, "Oh, Mary, wait until I quit my job. Until I went on vacation to quit her job, and she did it on purpose." Yes, if I did do it on purpose, yes. So I work at Amazon. It's still, you know, you just got different forms of whatever we're going to go through, but it just pulls me out of that until something else happens. And that's all I wanted to share. I've been trying to share it for a while, but when the program comes on, I have to be at work at 6:30, so sometimes I don't get in. But that's it. I wanted to share that with you guys, and thank you. And I do keep up with the book club, so, and thank you for taking my call, and I'll mute my line.
Thank you for sharing. Invisible Man, we're all done tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific. Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man, we are all done. Have loved every minute that we have read, but I am overjoyed to hear that you are no longer at that place, because I felt it was totally unsafe. I mean, Amazon, we're all on the plantation. I don't care how much money you make, what your compensation is, perks, how long you've been there, how big your office is. We're all on the plantation, even President Obama when he was hanging out in the White House. That being said, some spots on the plantation are more dangerous than others. At least that's what I've concluded. It seems like the spot at the hotel was extremely dangerous. I mean, wow. Like I could do a collage of the different times that you've called in where we had people hopping over the front counter, being violent, drunk, violent, intoxicated, patrons that you have to deal with, the disrespect from other employees and what have you. I mean, just rife with danger and mistreatment from so many different angles. It's not like they were paying you, $500,000 a year to do this madness. So I am overjoyed to hear that you're out of there. And I say that again because so many times the system of white supremacy, that's what it does. This system will have us where we have to struggle and fight so hard to get any sort of employment, anything at all, that we end up being in situations where we just taking this and, okay, this is not really what I want, but I'm just trying to do something just to get by for, a month or a couple months until I can get a better job. And that I'm going to be here for a little while ends up being like 5 years or 10 years or something, ghastly. So I'm ecstatic. I'm so glad to hear it. If this too is supposed to be temporary until you get something better, fantastic. Hopefully it won't last as long as the other treacherous spot. And that is a plus to be able to get everything lined up so that you could leave when you were ready to leave, when you had all your ducks in a row, as they say, so that you could leave without it causing problems. And if they want to be upset about that as you exit, well, so sorry. Moving on to better things. Grand. Bravo, Mom in the Bay Area. Other folks who dialed in, if you have either comments on what's been shared thus far, or if you have your own commentary, proceed. I guess one more thing about the segment that we heard about the physicians' racism against black professionals, quote unquote, in the St. Louis area. When the guest, victim of racism, when she was talking about the deliberate mangling of non-white titles and not calling folks by their name. She was talking about her situation where sometimes the students would not address her by her title, doctor, professor. They would call her by her name. Absolutely. Deliberate act of racism, white supremacy. Now, she didn't call it a deliberate act of racism, but she did hit the deliberate willfulness of this act. But man, that is something that applies to black males and black females. And I was going to try and pick out professors who talked about all that, but I'm just going to go back and re-invoke our former president. We had 8 years of whites not calling him by his title, president. I mean, right now, with everything they say about our current president, is still President Trump, Commander-in-Chief Trump. we had 8 years of that no good Obama and that no good Obama. And I even heard some slipping into Barack at times when you caught a white person who was really disgruntled about those niggers camping out in Washington, D.C. But anyway, I think that is widespread and a problem we've talked about for eons on this program. All manner of black people not being called by their correct title, nicknames, you name it. Whites do it. That is standard operating procedure. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, hand up, proceed.
May I be heard?
Right on cue, speaking of mangling of titles, Red in Nevada.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to share. The first thing, I have a commentary that I actually, from my workplace journal from last week, but just a commentary about the black male. I didn't hear the segments, but just the recap about him, but the black male who worked at the hardware store and him having to lose his job over, reacting to the overt racism. And I know in previous employment, in previous plantations, I've seen that happen to at least one black male, where it was at a call center, and the person, the white person, called the black male a nigger, and he reacted, and then next thing you know, he wasn't there anymore, and eventually it came out that he was fired because of what happened. And apparently that person who kept calling in, they would call in, keep calling, and keep calling people, niggers, or keep calling people names. And then they finally got to that one black male. I can't remember if they said that he said something back, but I know for sure that he had just hung up on the customer, and that was enough. And I know eventually, and this was long down the road, that they eventually said, if a customer is being abrasive, I guess, they of course not using racism or anything like that, but they said, just get them over to a supervisor, because that's what they're paid to deal with. And that's why I always keep in my mind, even though that was one plantation, but I just transferred on to other plantations, supervisors. They get paid to deal with things like that. So if your place of employment doesn't allow you to either walk away from the person or to hang up on them if you're speaking to them over the phone, I know different collection and plantations, if the people are being rude or whatever, they can hang up on you, and it's just not and it's not a big deal. But if you don't have that ability, then definitely maybe even looking toward getting them over to a supervisor, because that's what they get paid to do, finding somebody in upper management. And I know I actually had to deal with that not that long ago, where I can tell that it was a white person that I had to speak to over the phone, and just they use the term, they say we when they're mad at the company, but it's still kind of, I feel like they don't really mean we, like how worthless we are, and just all types of cursing and stuff like that. And, just kept my same tone, same mood, whatever. And finally, got to resolving whatever issue he had. And then kind of towards the end of the call, this happened a couple times. They'll either apologize, or they'll kind of have this lower tone voice, almost as if they were mad, or kind of upset that they could not get me to, act just as mean and nasty towards them. So that was just one thing to just reference the clips. But quickly, I'll go over some of the things that happened recently at this plantation. I was thinking about just different things that maybe if Black people are, brave enough to bring this type of thing up in an interview. But I know at certain plantations, they offer bonuses or incentives or whatever. But just kind of see if that is one of the things that is actually enticing you to go over to that type of employment. Then maybe even ask, if you're brave enough to ask, okay, well, how is this paid? Because it depending on how it's paid, is if it'll kind of let you can kind of figure the opportunity cost if it is good enough for you to consider that type of employment. Because if they
include the bonus in with your regular pay, you're going to get taxed very heavily, and it might not even be worth it. So just thinking about that. And then also with the whole putting in notice, I had heard a suspected racist on the job just speaking about how they used to be in upper management at another company, and they, with a person put in the notice, they would just immediately just walk them out right then and there, because they felt like, well, if they were in certain positions, and I feel like honestly, it doesn't really matter, but they were making the reference that, oh, well, this person handles cash and we can no longer trust them, so we just immediately walk them out because they don't have any reason to not steal from the company. So I just thought that was interesting. It's like they want us to put in the notice to kind of make it seem as if we are, quote unquote, responsible. But then if you do, you'll get possibly fired immediately. And I'll mute my line. Thank you for allowing me to share.
That is a great point to consider in terms of putting in your notice. I haven't heard of a situation like that before, where somebody immediately and walked out of the building. Not just today is going to be your last day, you can finish up at the day, but no, we have a cardboard box. Security will ask you out right now if you have a key or a passcode or whatever it is. We'll take that off. I mean, wow, that's like you've been criminalized, which is pretty much the system of white supremacy. That's, I think, also a great point about the bonus, or I guess any form of compensation that's going to be used to try to leverage you into making a decision about taking a job or not taking a job or whatever it is, to see exactly how that's going to be allocated, so you can get more details. And I don't think that's one you should have a lot of trepidation about. I think that's just being intelligent, just, to ask, just getting details. Is this a lump sum thing? Is this going to be taxed? Is this included with my normal compensation? I think that's a legit question. I don't think, unless they have something untoward planned to begin with, in which case it's good to, find all that out from the very beginning. But in my view, that's bravo, A plus to inquire about. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary on anything that has been shared thus far, or if you have your own situation, the number again, 641-715-3640, and the code 564-943#. Press *61 if you would like to participate, and I'll make sure I give a plug in the female speaker in the segment at the beginning of the program, University of Washington. That's in Missouri, not the one that's here. Or it's actually, theirs is Washington University. That's the distinction. The one in Missouri, Washington University's Adhere Harvey Wingfield. And she was talking about her book that's coming out, Flatlining Healthcare Work, Race, and Inequality in the New Economy. I always point that out as well when people find ways of using substitutes for white supremacy racism. It'll be white privilege, it'll be racial discrimination, whiteness, race, racial disparities. They got buckets of them, ways of getting away from the problem, white supremacy, racism. Call it what it is. Other folks who dialed in with the hand up, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Mr. Steele?
Yes. This is Ken Steele, and I'm reporting from Des Moines, Iowa on business. I can't wait till I leave. I can't wait to get back to California for a number of different reasons. But, yeah, I'm just not a big fan of Des Moines, Iowa, and I don't want to return.
I don't know anyone who is a fan of Des Moines, Iowa, excuse me.
Right? Who knows where I'm at? Anyway, I just wanted to remind everybody on the line, when assessing opportunities, consider this concept of opportunity cost. That is, what am I foregoing by pursuing a particular opportunity? And what are the ways that I can maximize the opportunities that are in front of me? And oftentimes, I'm just coming from Chicago, and I just met some of my friends from a few years back when I lived there. and I saw that they weren't really advancing in their careers. They didn't really advance in what they were doing. They were either doing the same job that they were doing when I left, or they are doing another job that is very similar to what they were doing before with zero advancement. And I hadn't been to Chicago in about 2 years. I haven't visited them in about 2 years. And that was astonishing to me. But it isn't when you consider that they have to take maybe an hour and a half every day, maybe 2 hours when you total it up together, just to commute from A to B for their opportunities. And then on top of that, the opportunities I'm talking about, that the jobs that they have, they're doing FedEx and working for Amazon and, just delivering packages. And that just takes so much of your time and your energy, and it basically keeps you stuck where you're at. And you want to avoid that when it comes to work, when it comes to whatever it is that you're doing for money. You want to maximize the amount of money that you can get and minimize the amount of time that it takes to get it. And oftentimes we get stuck in these modes of action and these jobs that just keep us occupied, keep us busy. They don't allow us to think. They don't allow us to plan for the future. They don't give us enough money for the future. And if you are in one of those jobs or one of those opportunities, leave. If you don't have any obligations to take care of, you're single, you don't have a family to maintain, cut all your costs, leave, fill out some paperwork, get some government aid. Oftentimes the government aid is going to pay you more than a job. And while you're on that aid, you can take the time to learn about different opportunities that you can pursue that will provide you with more time and more money, because that's the point. It's not the point of, an occupation isn't to do the occupation. It's to get the money so that you can live, so that you can enjoy life, so that you can grow, and hopefully you can pursue the cause and the mission of removing the system of racism and replacing it with a system of justice. If all of your time is spent sorting boxes and picking stuff up and commuting back and forth, and you only have a little bit of time and you don't have any money, that sounds like slavery to me. And I beg everybody on the line to really consider, how am I spending my time, and what am I getting for it? And is there an opportunity to do better? And more often than not, there is. You can spruce up your LinkedIn. You can work your contacts. You can see what people who are advancing, be it in your immediate circle or even people that you know just from Facebook or online. You can ask them what they're doing. Just do whatever you can to get out of that trap. Consider opportunity costs. Consider, what are you missing out on by going to this job every day? What are you missing out on by pursuing this, by doing this busy work and, getting paid these low wages? And, just look for more and try to and assess what you're doing. And if it's not working out for you, feel free to just leave. I'm going to go ahead and mute my line at this time. Thank you.
Value your time and energy. Appreciate that, Mr. Steele. Value your time and energy. Very important in the system of white supremacy. And similar to what I was saying when our mom in the Bay Area was speaking, racists, their system, it just does a phenomenal job of taking away our creativity, motivation, energy, kind of removing the horizon. So you just end up trapped in these spots, as Mr. Steele was saying, that are not serving any purpose other than just robbing your time, energy, your life currency, your life force, really, just robbing you while the system continues and you're not even really able to do anything to even the bare minimums. A lot of times these jobs are not even allowing us to do that. Just all by racist design, and to not be able to plan for the future while racists, they are making 500 and 5,000 year plans of terrorism. We're not even able to, make a stable plan for 7 days, all by design. Other folks that dialed in with a hand up, if you have commentary, line should be open. Proceed.
May I be heard?
Can I be heard?
Heard both of you.
First.
Wonderful. Draftomania, are you there, ma'am?
Yes, I am. Hi, Gus and Gus. I don't have much to report today. I just thought I would like to participate because, as you stated, this is not a spectator sport, and just to report on my workplace racism in regards to the training issue and how that's coming along. I still am not being properly trained, but I can say that it is getting better from me training myself. It's basically I'm just, using the materials that they have set forth in front of me, just going through the worksheets. And I can say as far as the anxiety and being nervous, I've just been implementing and staying calm on the job, not allowing myself to get upset, or I wouldn't even say upset. I would say basically fearful, because as a result of not being trained, for me, not knowing what I'm doing can trigger some fear in me, and then I can become anxious, and then that can, that causes anxiety, stress, depression, things like that. So what I've been doing, I've just been staying calm. Following the worksheets as far as the steps is challenging, because, you're going to have live calls and you're learning at the same time. So that's what I've just been doing. I've been, basically, I was attacked yesterday by, racist suspect on the phone. He was hurling all kinds of insults at me, and I stayed calm, and, I didn't react to this man, calling, making little insinuations about my character and me not doing my job properly and things like that. I just stayed calm, answered the questions, and that was that. Not taking it personal. And also, I wanted to comment on the report about the doctor from North Carolina that was being abused. And, I am relocated to North Carolina, and I can say that the South is a whole different world than what I'm used to. And, they play by a whole another set of rules. They basically, especially here in North Carolina, it's an at-will state, and they can fire you. And, they can fire you for whatever they want to fire you for and say that it's something else. And because it may be racism, but they don't, they won't have to expose that because it's an at-will state. And I've gone through, some situations, being fired from a job here in North Carolina. And it's just really, I really just don't like, I dislike North Carolina. But I'm here, so I just try to learn how to deal with it to the best of my ability. And also, I just wanted to let you know that I purchased the Medical Apartheid book from Amazon last week. I just got it last week, and I look forward to reading it. And also, I've been reading the Robert F. Williams, because I always listen to the archives. So some of the books that you have been suggesting, I have been reading, and I must say that they are very, very, very beneficial. And that's all I have to say, guys. Thank you. I'll mute my line.
Reading is more important than watching television. The grandsister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she said that regularly. Robert F. Williams, Negroes with Guns. We actually did a shorter book study on that way back when on the C.O.W.S as well. And certainly we spent months on medical apartheid. The great Harriet A. Washington, top 5 all-time medical apartheid. Other folks who dialed in, that's and great. I've said that consistently, that is the number one aspect of counter-racism as it relates to the job and maybe anywhere. Got to keep your composure. Racists are calling you names or insulting you, or you don't even know how to use a phone. You can't spell. How did you get this job? You're an affirmative action. Well, ma'am, your policy is such and such and such, or whatever it is. If it's supposed to be, well, at this point, we have to transfer you to a manager. Hold, please. I mean, it would be very little. 1 sentence, 2 sentences, maybe nothing. Got to keep your composure on the job. You cannot let them get you upset. And I'm so appreciative that you noting after they do these things to try to goad you and it doesn't work. And then, them seeming some type of way about it. I've seen that with a lot of times racists with whites. They want you to be the one that's foaming at the mouth and yelling and cursing. And they know, got them, bingo, another one fired. Woohoo! Go in there and get them fired and get, my opioid niece, get them a job up there or whatever so they can support their habit or what have you. This is a part of racist design. And I mean, that's just, I'm not stunned ever about a white person practicing racism. And as long as it's just them name calling, I don't care what it is, nigger, whatever they say, as long as it's just that, my heartbeat is not going to move at all. I'll figure out if this is the time I need to pull out my recorder. Do I need to pull out my pen and pad? Do I need to just give them a good, But I'm not going to be acting a fool over something any white individual said to me on the job, especially not on the phone. Like, come on. Outstanding job, Draftomania. Other folks who, there was a male caller who spoke up simultaneously. Thank you for yielding the floor, sir. Are you still with us, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. Hello, family. Thank you, everyone. I'm a first-time call-in. I listen to the show a lot. It really gets me through my week. I love the way that you handle everything so nice and calm and speak very clearly, no confusion, as you always say. It's hard. It's going to be pretty difficult for me to try to not use metaphors. As being a former artist, I'm really used to speaking, using a lot of metaphors all the time. But I told at first I was resistant to it, but now I understand why you have that caveat, so that you could actually say, use the exact words to describe what it is that you're feeling and convey your points clearly. So I understood. It took a while for me to come around to that. That's probably a metaphor. It took a while for me to reach that conclusion, but I understand now a lot clearly, especially being a dad. When you speak to your children, it's better to be as clear as possible. Also dealing with the way that dealing with VGQ, dealing with other people, other family members, I have to realize that we're all going through different types of struggles, different type of ups and downs, and we're all dealing with being underneath the system of white supremacy in our own way. So sometimes you have to meet people where they. Sometimes you have to be more patient with your own folks, especially knowing the situation and the circumstances that we are dealing with. And that's pretty much. Thank you so much for the broadcast, all of the broadcasts that you put out during the week. They really, really keep me nice and focused. And thanks a lot.
Wow. Grand first-time caller. Hope you're able to join us again if it's worthy of your time and energy. And always patience. Emphasize that regularly, trying to be patient with other victims. We are unfortunately not born having correct information about white supremacy, racism, and sometimes it can be difficult for us to process. We've been given so much toxic, faulty, illogical information and faulty concepts for our time on the planet, then when you start to get correct information, it can be difficult, especially correct information about racism, white supremacy. Like, wow, that is not exactly pleasant information to digest, but truth is needed. So I'm glad to hear that, and hopefully your patience will reward you, especially dealing with other victims of racism. Maybe you can give us the update. Other folks who dialed in, if you have questions, comments, especially if you have like suggestions, if you figured out some counter-racist codification for the job that works to help solve problems, man, that is always super appreciated. Would love to hear from you. If you have problems and you would like counter-racist suggestions or perspectives, certainly that is always welcome. Folks who dialed in, if we've not heard from you, proceed. Well, while folks are spectating, one of the people that wrote in, make sure that I do not miss all the folks who wrote in. So when I did the broadcast earlier this week, I was talking about yoga teacher training and the adjustments, that doing like physical adjustments for the postures, where you, as the instructor, you actually go and are touching the student's body and kind of repositioning them and what have you. And I was saying this is the age where Bill Cosby is supposed to be branded a sexually violent predator. I am not, putting my mitts on anybody, especially some stranger in a class, and grabbing them by the hips and whatnot. Like, come on. Anyway, I asked if we have listeners, if your occupation requires you to do any sort of touching of folks, how have you, adjusted your code to be able to get through that without being accused, or, all the other things that could come up as a result of that. And so we did have folks write in email. I was thinking that, we got suggestions as well. I asked for suggestions about ways that I could teach yoga to exclusively non-white people. That is the only way I think I would be willing to teach or be a yoga instructor, is if I had an environment where I know, guaranteed, I would be exclusively teaching to non-white and preferably black students. That's it. So that was first portion. Getting to the workplace racism. As a therapist who works with clients who have hand injuries, spine injuries, and lymphedema, etc., I have to perform manual therapy and provide direct physical contact with clients all day. My code is that I always ask permission to touch them, and I verbalize to them why I'm touching, where I will be touching, and how the touch should and should not feel. And if possible, I even demonstrate what I will do to them on myself. I will condense the instructions with repeated visits, but I always ask permission to touch them no matter how long I have been working with them. This is my code no matter how long I have been treating the person, and no matter if they are white or non-white. Non-white black female who is without justice. Know that experience very well. Not the black female part. I think that's great. We are supposed to ask permission at the beginning of every class to let people know, and to give people the opportunity to opt out if they don't want to be touched. So that is going to be ironclad. That is something that I've noticed that not all instructors do ask permission. And then even though they don't ask permission, they still come around and put their mitts on people. But asking permission every single time, and then this is exactly, what I'm going to be doing, and I think that's great, to be as clear as possible. I still would feel some type of way if I was having to touch a white. I didn't ask this person doing physical therapy. Are you like going to a person's house, or are they coming to you? Like, where's this at? That would be maybe interesting to add on if we have folks out there who are doing any sort of contact. Is this happening where you might have to go to the person's residence? Does the code change there? If you're a male and you're having to do this with a female, does your code change? If you're a female, you're doing this to a male, does your code change? If you're a non-white person, you're doing this to a white person as opposed to a non-white person, does your code change? Just curious for any folks who your occupation, some aspect of it may require you to actually place your hands on another person, especially in an intimate way. If folks have a code they would be willing to share, I'm definitely looking to, because that is code that I do not have, so I'm having to make that up as I go. Folks we've not heard from, if you have commentary you would like to share, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Retired firefighter in Florida. Yes, sir.
Greetings, everyone. I heard the somewhat of the question, and I heard the first part of it. It kind of like got me a little bit excited because I actually was going to give a report on something that happened. Of course, not on my job because I'm retired, but in the medical workplace hospital that involved touching. As one can figure out, with the fire department, you're going to be touching a lot of people. I know when I say fire department, people think about fires, but just about everywhere, for the most part, most of the calls that firefighters go on are not fires. It's medical, emergency medical patients and situations. So you are touching people. But my reported experience that I wanted to report took place maybe about an hour ago. Had to transport my sister, who's in charge with my mother, had to transport her via fire rescue to the hospital. Her condition is basically just stable for her age and her condition. But another visit to the hospitals, just to paraphrase everything. And so it's a situation now that you have a situation where non-white people are in the midst of the medical atmosphere called a hospital. Down here in South Florida, I would say most of the personnel and most of the physicians are white people whose primary language is Spanish. They also speak English, of course. Their primary language is Spanish. And in turn, on the subject of the medical profession, basically, race of the white supremacy, of course, all of us know it fluctuates everywhere in all aspects. It doesn't make a difference what people activity that you're involved in. Being that we're talking about right now, I'm talking about the medical profession, of course, is in there. Basically, the white people in that atmosphere basically have your life or some loved one of yours life in their hands in a lot of cases. And they kind of like have you in a situation where they can carry out their shenanigans, and with the advent that, if you react unfavorably to their shenanigans, that, the idea that, hey, that is your mom, isn't it? Not literally saying it, but, the attitude could transfer to that person. But nevertheless, the incident was, one of these RNs stepping on my feet. And she did it once, and she did it again. And I said, excuse me, twice, in a nice way. Not excuse me as opposed to, excuse me, wasn't like that. It was like, excuse me, that sort of thing. And the second time, she reacted by trying to touch me on my shoulder, and I put my hand up and say, I don't want to be touched, but excuse me. That's basically what I said. But it was just a thought that I've been having since I've been having this experience as 1/5 of my mother's children. That in the period of time that she's been in hospice care, and also directly within the hospital itself, and learning a lot, matched with the book, the fantastic book, Medical Apartheid. It really is like a real good I don't want to use a metaphor. It's a really good learning process. I put it that way. Very good learning process on understanding and studying the global system of racism, white supremacy, and how it's actually infected in all 9 areas of activity, and every activity where white people at, they bring it with them. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Much obliged for sharing, retired firefighter. I know, I'm sure many listeners, and myself included, wish the best for your mom. Thoughts, prayers to her, and hope that she's able to get out of there, get out of the racist clutches as soon as possible. But we've talked about pretty consistently with regards to touching in the workplace and having a code, and that's just another one, so that, hey, I'm solid, this is exactly what I'm going to do, and this is my limit in terms of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And we've talked about it. I think Ivy, she said, I don't do handshakes. I don't do any of that. And I already have my words together for what to say, what not to say. We talked about Emmy. She's talked about repeatedly about having her code, any sort of grabbing like that on the shoulder, or sometimes they'll come up from behind you and try to do the back rub type of thing, or grab that, hey, moving away immediately. It might be a snatch away. If you're seated, it might be a standing up. It might be a taking your hand and just moving their hand away, or you can just verbally tell it, whoa, I don't need to be touched. Thank you kindly. And we can just go about our business, but not being surprised about racist, all that pawing. That's exactly what I've been saying for the past week. I don't know why I was not, I was surprised. Maybe I was not on code as I should have been, but I was not prepared for all of the pawing to come up in class. But yeah, I've been saying that for a week. All of this pawing in this environment, and in general in a system of white supremacy, which demands a lot of molesting, rape, sexual. I mean, that is just rife throughout the system. Let's really try to cut back on, not just be mindful, but let's try to minimize the amount of unnecessary pawing that's going on, so we can reduce opportunities for these sort of things to take place. But great job. I think that is phenomenal. I think that's always an illustration of black self-respect. When black people set up boundaries about how whites are going to access their body, and even restricting white access to our bodies in any way, I think that is outstanding illustration of black self-respect, in my view.
Can I say something brief, Gus?
Yes, sir.
About a little bit about my personality is that I'm not a touchy-feely person. Period. Even to non-white people. My mother used to say she used to have to kind of like go out of her way to hug me, that sort of thing, because I wasn't that type of person. But with people who deserve it, I do care. I do show care through action with them. But the huggy type of thing, I'm not that way. So that's what makes it very easy for me with a stranger or a white person. I'm on alert with it, and I always have been. And even the situation of handshaking, I had to take my car to get repairs that was some damage that was done to it, and the guy wanted to shake my hand. I said, I'm just out here for business, and because I didn't put my hand out, as far as that's concerned. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Keep it business. Keep it business. Woo. big advocate of that black self-respect and just having boundaries and being consistent about, how you want to be touched and how you allow people to touch. Because that comes up even, I don't want to get off topic, but that comes up a lot in the system of white supremacy, and it definitely comes up a lot in the context of the job. Don't be surprised. I wish people had told me about that years ago, and not being surprised and being prepared to make sure that you can protect the boundaries of your own body at all times and do that proudly. Other folks who dialed in, if you have a hand up, if we've not heard from you at all, proceed.
Hello, may I speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everybody, and good evening to the host. This is Irie in New Orleans, and I'm kind of catching up on the show, but excuse me. Something I've wanted to share thoughts on really quick was when I heard the story about the court clerk and the white female that was exchanging her sexual stories with him. I don't know if anybody said this because I couldn't finish the episode yet, but I really did, if he's listening, wanted to ask him to tell her next time she approaches him, to ask her, why are you telling me this? What makes you think, I want to know if it's about you? And then just wait for a response. And then, I would suppose logically whatever the response is, I thought that you were open-minded, or I thought that you were, a little bit, whatever she says, I would say, I really don't want to look at you, any differently than I do as one of my fellow coworkers. So, we shouldn't discuss it. And that way, to tip the scales where she's a little bit ashamed of herself, hopefully, and would certainly second guess mentioning anything outside the courtroom, let alone say to him. And it was two other things I'll share briefly in regard to touching people, whether it's people you're helping work out or like patients. I used to be a mental health tech, and the people were profoundly disabled, and I would still say, pardon my touch, I'm going to, ... Like the person that wrote in said, I would explain it. I would even gesture like she explained too. And then because I was in a mental health position and would have to document, I would also document exactly what I did. And the last thing I want to share is recently I started working for a rideshare company, and the responses of the European American patrons to my political views and music has been very interesting. I found that the more I play pop music that either does not contain non-white voices or does, but has that, not to be metaphorical, but sounds like CNC Music Factory, that gospel with the pop dance sound, as long as it's something like that, I get very high ratings. A young homosexual white man even went out of his way to tell me, this has been one of the best rides I've ever had. The music was absolutely perfect. Is your playlist online? One of the sharing apps, I guess where you can share like Pandora or whatever, which I didn't realize you could share a playlist, but he was asking if he could find it and everything because it was the most perfect ride with the perfect music. And there were no non-white people for the most part in the playlist. And thank you very much for letting me share. I'll mute my line. Thank you.
Much obliged, folks down in Louisiana. This is, let me see, 13-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina coming up. 13 years. The portion about the music, because we just had a listener last week on the Neutralizing Workplace Racism segment. A person wrote in and we're talking about doing ride sharing, and they were talking about music, and they said that, or they mentioned two things. They said, one, the music. They said that they had white passengers complained about their music, and I guess gave them negative reviews or something, and that was a part of it. And it was, I think he said he was playing like Robert Glasper Experience. If people don't know, you should Google I Love Robert Glasper Experience. They are extraordinaire, but I mean, these are black musicians. But he said he was playing like Robert Glasper and, some other stuff, and they griped about that. The other point that he raised, he said that he had a white person who said that they had extensively reviewed his profile online, and I guess he's done a lot of trips. It was hundreds. I think I'm purposely minimizing. It may have been more than that, but hundreds of trips or whatever. And so this person had went through all of the reviews or trips or whatever that was available on his profile, which again, just in my view, racist man, racist woman, racist child, they are not ignorant about the system of white supremacy, studying niggers. That is their primary job. Anywho, with the ride share, I would just, that's another one that I think can be kind of dangerous. We've had a number of people who've talked about that and some of the hazards and problems that can be presented there. I would have an ironclad code to make sure that I am safe in all of that, because I think there have been so many incidents of particularly intoxicated whites doing the ride sharing and becoming terroristic before they get to point B. So I would have a really solid code to stay safe. Other folks that we have not heard from at all, if you have commentary on what's been shared thus far, perhaps we'll have our caller in Florida who can give us the update. But thoughts on what's been shared thus far, or if you have your own situation, proceed.
Have you heard?
Thomas in New York, good to hear from you, sir.
Good to hear from you as well, Gus. Good to hear from all the callers. Workplace racism, dealing with it as always. The same terrorist is always terrorizing me. Today, I was dealing with another terrorist, but she comes off a lot more pleasant. But she's one of these people that tells you to do something, and then within a matter of an hour, she'll come back and forgot what she just told you to do, and you could be doing what she told you to do, and she'll come back like, why are you doing it that way? And you're like, oh, this is how we discussed it, and then everything is, let's have another meeting about it. It's very difficult. Nothing's in writing. Everything is on the fly. This is also the person in charge of human resources. So it was review time, so I got a review. I had to review myself. I hate doing that. They asked me 7 or 8 questions, and I tried to answer them. And as codified as possible, without, the way the questions were worded. In fact, the next show, I'm going to print it off, and I could read the questions. Either way, we didn't get a chance to discuss the review. She kept putting it off until the next day because she's busy. So, I started to think, oh man, is this bad or what? So then, one day, it was last Friday, she calls me in the room and says, we did your review, and I have been busy and I haven't gotten a chance to go over it with you. And I know I've, had you lingering. But it's not bad. You got a raise, and we'll discuss it, but, you only been here 6 months, so, it's not a big raise, either way. So I felt a little bit better. So finally today, we go over this review, and it was only about 5 minutes it took. So, we could have did this in one of our long conversations about her changing her mind. But either way, as far as the whole thing went, the terrorist who's always terrorizing me was ultimately the person that weighed in on everything. She went by her word because she works with me more than the person who's doing the actual review. And surprisingly, she didn't give me a bad review. It was pretty good. The only thing that was in it was that she wants me to come to her more so she can help me make more decisions. And I said, this sounds exactly like her. She wants to make every decision. Can I go to the bathroom? Yes, okay. Like that type of situation. The white male that I told you before, I thought reached for, tried to zipper me up. Okay. he tells me the other day he comes in the kitchen while I'm cutting fruit, and he's one of the people that like to come in and, hey man, can I just take a couple of these? So I'll just be like, yeah, go ahead. I mean, I can't tell him no. So either way, he comes in there and this white female passes. Now this white female is I would equate her to a white female that white men would be attracted to. Blonde hair, very tall, just Barbie-ish looking. And she walks past and he grabs his cane like it's his penis, like, he puts it like a penis and he holds it up like as she walks past him, like, and I thought he was gay up until that point where he could still be gay, but so he went on to start talking about her in a very derogatory way, things he would do to her. And I just thought that was extremely odd. And this person as well, I looked him up, got the marketing that the photographer came and took pictures of all the partners and directors and things, and he's a director. And he's one of the people that put together the program. I mean, this dude is, if you've seen him, you would think, not this guy. He put together the founding member of the program for the Israelis to train the U.S. Police Department. He's one of the founding. I have the paper with the actual acronym and the name of it. I don't want to butcher it. But nonetheless, the file situation, I think the last time we spoke, I was telling you that I was having problems with the files. The lady who gave me the review, the HR head lady, the person that's, supposedly my boss, and the person that's always terrorizing me, who's the owner's secretary, and also the office manager, I suppose. The guy wouldn't take the files, so I had to put them back, by the cabinets or the file cabinet. So the white lady came and looked past the mean one, the one that's always terrorizing me, and she says, "Why are these files here?" And I explained to her the situation. So when the HR lady came over, I mean, she ripped this other white lady. I mean, it was just terrible. I mean, I felt like, my God, I'm just so glad she's not doing this to me. Someone else finally got it. But so, of course, that trickled right over to me. When you Thomas, you got to do something about these files. And I'm like, well, we've already discussed this. What do you want me? Just put it in his office. I don't care what anyone says. So now they put me in a situation where I'm forcing files on people who own the company. And, they could just snap their finger and get rid of me. But, they don't want it there. I'm putting it there anyway. I feel like it's just a terrible situation, and the way everything is being managed is horrible. But, this is how they work things. And a lot of times these partners are saying just throw things out, and they're not looking at it, but they just don't feel like being bothered. And this is important stuff that they need to look at. So, it's like I don't really want to throw it out because it'll come back to me. So it's a real tough situation. They hired a new worker, and this lady is a white lady from France, an older person, very, very prominent wrinkles in her face, small little white lady. But either way, she smells like I guess they wear that strong perfume. Oh my God, she smells like, old women perfume. And she's the most annoying thing. I swear, I would deal with the one who's always terrorizing me before this lady. And she keeps jamming the Xerox machine that's in my little office space. And I keep telling her that what she's doing is jamming the machine, and she keeps doing the wrong thing because she doesn't want to feel as though she has to listen, and then she breaks it when she tries to fix it instead of telling me, listen, it's jammed again, and I go and fix it. And it's just, she's just the worst. I mean, she's rubbed everyone the wrong way. And I see the attitude of this lady, and just different dealing with white people from other places, is they're very, like, they'll just go in your drawer. It's like, excuse me, and no, oh, I'm sorry, I was looking for the stapler, yeah, but you asked, You don't know what I have in my drawer. Oh, we don't do that where I'm from. Where that's how it works here. But just one of those type of situations. And thank you, Gus, for listening, and everyone else.
Context of White Supremacy. Much obliged, Thomas in New York. Before I get my commentary about those possessive adjectives, the white woman who made sure that you got a little extra cornbread, not the one that did the review, but the one who's been terrorizing you, who had the real say about your cornbread. Is this the same white woman who stole your nuts previously?
Yeah, she's the white woman who likes to eat black nuts, I guess. Yes, sir.
Context of White Supremacy. The possessive adjective, very important. I brought that up. I don't know if it's been years yet on that one. I feel like that's a newer aspect of the code, something that took me some time to think about. But I have been saying it for a while. It's not new. When it comes to the job, it's not even my job. It's not my desk. I think that's very important for us to keep that in mind, because exactly what Thomas said, they will be rifling through not your desk, their desk. Might be rifling through your nuts, whatever it is that you leave around in the office. So you just have to be mindful of that. Racists, I mean, their job is terrorizing black people, and they do not take vacations. They don't take breaks. That is a constant activity. So just be mindful of that. And I mean, they might come out with any sort of tacky. Oh yeah, that was just the work environment that we had on the previous job. If you could just if you needed something and person wasn't in their office, you could just go in and get what you got. Hey, we're not stealing anything. We're all one family. What are you talking about, Tom? I'm not stealing from my. They will say anything. You're under surveillance, and just be mindful of that. They're probably rifling through your desk the moment that you get up to go to the bathroom or get anything, get a snack in the office. That I remember that with the files, because it had been a while since we got the update on that piece of it. But whites, they do that sort of thing regularly, where it might be one white person who is causing a problem, or maybe it's a couple whites who are in conflict with one another. That, as opposed to just going to the white person who is causing the problem, address it directly, and we get all this solved. We find a way to get a black person who has no power at all over any of these individuals, get some victim of racism, get them involved, so that maybe every white person gets an opportunity to fuss at this black person, while the problem has never been solved because we never went to the white person who started all this. Like, they love that is their main activity above and beyond anything else. And if these are attorneys, who knows what type of legal documents and what have you are being tossed around, and people's lives are being held around, while we'll just make Thomas wag that over there again. Oh no, wag it back over there. Wag that over there, Thomas. Why is it still hit? Practicing racism, white supremacy, and finding ways to abuse black people in the meantime.
Hey Gus, and it's worse than lawyers. These are accountants. I mean, these are people's trust. I'm like, man, it's crazy. One thing, man, this lady that terrorizes me, like I said before, she's from Ireland. And she's real short. I mean, very leprechaunish. And this summer, she has turned so many colors. I mean, I get the heebie-jeebies just looking at her. I mean, it's like a reddish, but she has these dark spots. And I'm starting to think this is probably why they weren't allowed to be called white when they first came here. Of course, they done mixed in with the other whites now, and, they probably don't all have the natural thing like she got. But, I mean, just totally, I mean, I got to stand over her while she cuts the nail. She wears these very, stringy shirts, where her whole shoulder and back is out, and it's like, oh, my God. It's such a difficult thing to look at. And I got a picture of what came over the copy machine. So generally, if I'm sitting there and I have a little downtime, I'll pick up all the copies and deliver them to the people's desk, just so that, no one will come in there looking for it anyway. So, I get rid of it. And that way, I have a little bit more downtime when I get back. And took all the stuff over, and one of them was a picture. You know, of course, I looked through them, and it was a picture of this partner who's on vacation, and he's so deep red. And his secretary told me that he thought he had skin cancer because he had some spots that came up, and she couldn't believe that he went to this island there, and him and his wife are on this island. Nobody else is on the island but them. I mean, this guy makes, a pretty penny. So, but when I saw the picture, it once again, it's just, but I'll mute my line. Thank you, Gus.
Context of White Supremacy. When we did teacher training on Sunday, I think I did mention this. I requested if we could go up on the rooftop, which we did. It's been like 83 degrees every day since, I don't know, Saturday here in Seattle. Sunny, 80 degrees every single day, which is what it was Sunday. We went on the roof. I think within about 5 minutes, they had broken out every bottle of a sunscreen that they could. And I think within about 35 minutes, half of the group had disappeared. So we can't take it. Got to get out of here. It's just too hot. And now, I mean, again, put that in context. 83 degrees. I don't know what the temperature is in Florida, Vegas, where it is, but I'm pretty sure the vast majority of folks, at least the folks in the, northern hemisphere, I think would take 83 degrees with no humidity. We don't have all that ugly Louisiana. Yes, Lord. Louisiana, I think Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Nevada, I think would trade 83 degrees with a breeze as a daytime high. Whites were suffering. Couldn't take it. 30 minutes. Got to get out of here. Get going back downstairs. Lost half of the group. 30 minutes. Couldn't even get through a whole episode of Scandal. Other folks that dialed in, number again, 641-715-3640. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Folks, we missed completely. If you have a hand up, proceed.
May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
I spoke a little bit earlier, and I wanted to wait until the racism on the job show, but lo and behold, this is it. Unfortunately, I missed the beginning, but I will catch the YouTube video when it comes back. But I wanted to say, because every time when I listen to the show, I always think, you say in the beginning, if you're at a job that you have not experienced any of the typical situations that we go through in employment, please speak up. So I'm currently employed in a situation. I work in IT. I'm a system analyst. I'm currently, it's a promotion and a raise. First, I just got it to this new job. I've been there for a few months. I work there directly. It's at a hospital. I'm sure the brother from New York, the caller from New York, will be familiar with. It's in New York. And I've been there for 3 months. Now, when I interviewed for the job, it was for a contract position. And in my field, you get a lot of contract positions. And it's very unstable. You can never relax. You're always job hunting because you're someplace for 6 months and then they let you go. And you go someplace else, and you're someplace else for 6 months, and they let you go, and you're someplace else. The pay is decent, but your life is constantly in shambles because you're stressed out. You're always looking for another job. You don't know. You're on pins and needles every day. For any reason, they'll let you go. You don't really get to advance in your career because you don't get to do new and challenging things. So there's a lot of information that you just won't get your hands on. So I interviewed for this job, and it was just for a contract position. But the brother I interviewed with was a non-white Caribbean brother, and he chose to hire me directly. So now I'm working for the city, and pretty much everyone in my office is non-white people, and the hospital is in the area where there's non-white people. So it's prosperity by omission. There are white doctors in the hospital there, but they are silent and they don't behave as they normally do because there's a lot of black people and Latino, non-white, Spanish-speaking people around. So they don't behave as they normally do. I've worked in accounting firms, I've worked in lawyers, and I've worked down in the Wall Street area, and I'm familiar with all of the tricks. They're all there. They're all there. All of the tricks of the trade are on full display. But in this case, you don't need to say good morning. Don't need to say anything. You just walk by and you go in and I do my work and I'm in my office and it's me and there's another non-white black person there and my boss is a non-white black person and there are a couple of non-white Spanish-speaking people and a non-white Arabic Muslim brothers there and there's another few of them there. It's amazing. But so far, so good. And none of the usual things. I'm learning stuff. He's showing me stuff. He's patient. He doesn't put me in the task without giving me training before the new task. And I mean, I'm a fish out of water. This job is actually very, very next level from what I normally do. But he's so patient with me. And the guy is younger than my boss is younger than me by a few years. And, he's so patient and we deal with it. So I don't want to ramble on, but this is a situation that seems to be working, and it's only prosperity by omission. Thank you for listening.
Well, that's. I'm glad there have been, I guess, no difficulties thus far, and if you don't have to have a lot of direct contact with whites, and the black people that you work with are patient, sharing constructive information and helping you out on the job so that you can succeed, do well, and as I said, move right on up the ladder, as they say. Well, then, bravo, outstanding. I guess for most people, that probably is not going to be something that they can replicate to subtract whites from their workplace so that they can get a predominantly white or exclusively predominantly non-white or exclusively non-white work environment. But at least for, I guess, in your situation, that's great, because I have heard from people who work in environments that don't have very many white people or none, and they still have a very toxic environment because there's so much anti-blackness. Like, just because there's no whites doesn't mean that there are going to be lots of patient coworkers who train you adequately and, make sure that every day is just a peaceful, constructive experience. Like we have heard a lot of people who experience a lot of toxicity and anti-blackness in environments that are void of whites. So at minimum, I'm glad to hear that it's been a constructive experience for you thus far, sir. Other folks who, I guess, and be mindful, if anything happens, I guess you can let us know or give us updates. But hopefully it'll continue for a long, long time until you get ready to retire, decades from now. Well, I won't say decades from now. Hopefully you can retire soon and put your time and energy towards replacing white supremacy with justice. Other folks.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Full disclosure, there is one white woman there who tends to like to mess with names. She tends to pick out names. That's her thing. Whenever she hears a name, but she gets drowned out. Then there's another elderly, not elderly, more like in her 50s, dusty blonde, and she doesn't speak a word ever, but you can just see she's kind of like seething. But the other one, she picks at names, Boomquisha and things like that, but she gets drowned out. It's weird. It's amazing.
The names again. Standard operating procedure. Just got to find a way to disrespect black people's titles, black males and black females. Standard operating procedure. Some of the folks that wrote in with regards to workplace racism. Black female. Since I'm the only black female in my department at this point, my white supremacist boss has been able to practice racism against me without backlash. One of my white coworkers When she feels like taking a 2-hour lunch, she will drop her work off on my desk. I usually take her work and put it right back on her desk. My white coworker will then run to my white supremacist boss and get her to instruct me to complete this work because this lady has so much work to do that she needs help. This lady is always playing victim and expects me to care that she has so much work to do, which is a lie. My white supremacist boss has been, in her words, monitoring me. She has multiple people check on me. She monitors my emails and calls. When I come in, there's always a white person coming over to my desk to see if I'm there. She has white employees pretend to look for files or whatever so they can watch and spy on me. The white supremacist boss will try to pin my white coworker's mistakes on me. She gets upset when she can't blame me and refuses to acknowledge the white employee's mistakes. I'll pause here, even though there is one more paragraph just to try to get things. This is where I say employee or whites in general, they know it's incorrect. If you ever hear someone say to a black person or to a non-white person, work capacity, oh, don't compare yourself to other people. That is total nonsense in a work situation. Starting with the lunch situation, that's one right there where it's going to be. This has got to be compared to everybody. Our lunch policy is enforced, whatever it is. If you get 30 minutes for lunch, if you get an hour for lunch, whatever it's supposed to be, or even if you can take a 2-hour lunch, but that does not mean I get to take a 2-hour lunch and then I get to come in and complain that, my work is off schedule. Most places that I know are not going to allow for a 2-hour lunch break. That's what I mean about document. And then I would just ask questions, what is happening with how we allocate our time that is causing people to get behind in the amount of work that's done? Because, this is one I'm sure we can look at caseloads or whatever it is. How many reports or projects is this person working on? How many am I working on? If we have an equal amount of work, why is it that this person is consistently behind and needing help when we have an equal workload? Then we can start looking at how we allocate time. Oh, this person is taking 2-hour lunch breaks. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe it's not that she needs me to help her with her work. Maybe she needs to make sure that she's only taking a 30-minute lunch break or hour or whatever it's, supposed to be. With the surveillance, all of us, you should just expect that, particularly 2018, that I don't care if that's all you do all day is cut bananas. You're under surveillance. They're going to have everything that you say transcribed. You should just automatically accept that under the system of white supremacy. That's not anything to be upset about. That's not anything to be stunned about. That is the plantation 2018. And function accordingly with regards to what you say, what you don't say in those environments. Yeah, in this environment, if you know the accusations, that's what I've stated consistently, always take any sort of accusations against you in a work environment seriously. That's not saying that you curse out or begin yelling, but that's never anything to joke about or to minimize. I would want that investigated, and that's the sort of language that I would use. Let's investigate this to see if there's any merit to this accusation, because if I'm at fault, hey, I want to get this corrected immediately to make sure that I'm in compliance. But if this is meritless, then we should find that out as well. So let's go ahead and get this investigated. Always be zealous about it, especially if you are zealous about being in compliance with policy and procedure that you know like the back of your hand. It's not Saturday, so I can invoke the metaphor. You know the policy and procedure, so you are in adherence as often as you can be. So, hey, I'm zealous. Let's investigate. If I find out that I am not in compliance, then I can correct that immediately, and this will be a learning opportunity for everyone. But be very serious about any charges of misdoing, particularly if you think it's a situation like this person is writing about, where other racists are causing problems, but they're trying to blame them on you. Well, then let's vigorously investigate everyone and see where it goes. If it's coming up someplace else, well, then fine. Then see if we can generate as much documentation around that as possible. But I would be gleeful, not an attitude. Let's go ahead and see what's there. If there's smoke, let's see if there's any fire. She continues, my white supremacist boss is quite dangerous. She's married to a black male and her supervisor is a black male. She's extremely calculating. Anytime she wants to practice racism, she will send her black male boss after me to carry out her racism. The black supervisor has absolutely no power and he knows what she's doing, but this place is so backwards. I would be curious how you have concluded that this black male knows what she's doing. I've found frequently that many black people are not aware. They might understand some aspect, but I found that generally speaking, most non-white people, we are not that informed at all. Continuing. The supervisor has to carry out her racism to protect himself. I have a hard time referring to him as a victim since he makes sure to hurt and treat black clients unjustly. He is not unaware about his mistreatment towards black people. He is a willing participant, which makes this place extremely toxic. Now, see, that's what I've said. We talked about this regularly. I've seen a lot of situations, although there's a white person here, but I've talked with many victims and we've had many sessions of workplace racism where it ended up being victims that were blamed or victims are somehow not thought of as victims. They have become willing participants in the system of white supremacy. And in my view, that is simply not logical. Even if you did have a non-white person who understood every single aspect of white supremacy, if they are non-white and subject to the system of white supremacy, they're a victim. That's just logic. It doesn't matter whether, really, nothing matters. What they think about it, what they feel about it, if they're going along with it, they are subject to the system of white supremacy. So whites can order today, Bob, they don't call you Mr. or whatever, Bob, you're going to go down there and be rude to every single nigger in the cubicle. And hey, if you don't want to do it, no problem. We can fire you. You can not have a job too. They're really good at firing people. I mean, I think a lot of us have seen where this seems to be standard operating procedure. If you understand and accept that, does that make you a willing accomplice? In my view, no, I'm just following logic. If we want a plantation, which is the way that they would operate things, you get a non-white person to go out and do the lashing sometimes. Now, does that make him in charge of the plantation? In my view, that is not logical. And I don't really see what problem it solves. I guess that's the fast forward. In those type of situations, I think it is most important and logical. The person who is most to blame for all of this is not that black male who could be replaced like snap of a finger. It is that white woman. You said yourself, I can just go back and read what you said. The white boss used my search feature on the computer. Bang! The black supervisor has absolutely no power. Nothing else matters. What he thinks about it, what he feels about it, whether he's doing this gleefully with a smile, whether he throws peanuts at you. I'll just read what it says again. The black supervisor has absolutely no power. I am in the business of following logic and dealing with the person who has the power to cause this problem or to solve this problem. That's the way that I think we should think in the workplace, because what happens, I'm just going by the evidence of what I've seen, what happens when you don't focus on the person who has power, you just end up with a lot of emotion that does not really solve a problem. Because, I mean, we can all sit around and get mad at that black supervisor. Man, we have done tons of programs on the cows where that's all we did. Gripe and complain about that no good black supervisor. He's a coon and a Sambo and an Uncle Tom. 3 cheers for coon of the month. We never get to solving problems. Even if it's going to be, okay, this person is rude and discourteous, well, what can be done about that? Are there things that can be done to minimize this person this black person being rude and discourteous with me? Yes, we've talked about that, but I've just noted frequently the conversation does not get to that. It just stays with this person is doing it willfully, and they're a coon and an Uncle Tom, and who's with me? Coon of the month. That's why this person didn't do any name calling, but I'm just saying I've seen that consistently when it starts to be this person is not a victim. They are a willing accomplice in all of this. It almost starts to head into, I think they're white, in fact. They are racist. That's the way that I think of them, not a victim. I just don't think that that's logical. I'm a big, enormous advocate of following logic, not emotion in the workplace. Logic tends to solve problems when dealing with whites, especially on the job. If I have been talking nonsense, let me know. We have folks that dialed in the number 641-715-3640, the code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. And just make sure I wasn't just talking. We had Mr. Edward Williams, founder of counter-racism.com, on the program. We asked him about that question specifically. When you have a black supervisor manager who's being discourteous, rude in the way that they talk to black employees specifically, what are some things that you could do? Taking that electronically, where you start to ask questions electronically to get responses, that can be a great one to try to minimize the amount of verbal communication that you have, and even asking questions about, why am I being talked to in this manner? Is this a part of the company's strategy in terms of how we talk to employees of the company? And you can even, is everyone in the company supposed to be talked to in this manner? Is this how the CEO is talked to? Is this how we talk to other employees? Is this how I'm supposed to talk to other folks that I speak with? Or if we have patrons, this is how I'm supposed to address them as well? There are questions that can be asked, and especially taking that communication electronically. Many people are much more hesitant to write you a nasty company letter saying, you know good such and such and do this. And many people will not do that. They might talk real tough and nasty verbally or what have you, but they're probably not going to do that if they have to give you a written electronic response. But there were other suggestions as well. If folks, that is a serious problem, there are suggestions. There are ways that you can try to minimize that as well. Other folks who have commentary, if we've not heard from you, proceed.
If there's no one new, I was going to report again.
Oh, there are other folks new. I'm trying to get the lines to cooperate. I will make sure that we get you as well, retired firefighter. Was I able to get any of Was I able to get any of the folks line open who dialed in more recently with a hand up? Any of the newer callers? Was I able to get your line open? I will take that as a no. Give 1 second. I don't know why the switchboard is going a little slow to show me the microphone hands again. I'll try and refresh my browser and see if that works. It's being a little slow to refresh for them. Oh, okay, here we go. All right, so let's try again. See if that... And it's still not doing it. Refresh the page again. The page for the switchboard is not behaving correctly. I do see the other folks who dialed in. I'm going to try one more time to see if I can get the switchboard to function correctly. Sorry for the folks who dialed in more recently. Difficulties. It's been summer of difficulties with different electronics. The archives and the switchboard being a little wonky today. System, I just told someone that expect opposition with regards to the system of racism, white supremacy. They will not make it easy in trying to undo their madness. Well, while I'm waiting for the switchboard to see if it will function correctly, retired firefighter, if you want to share, and hopefully I'll get this to work correctly, and we'll be able to get the other folks who dialed in more recently.
Yes, I was just going to add on a report that you just finished, the subject you just finished commenting on. And my experiences, it was in the fire service also. And one thing that I I noticed that basically had a level of control on that subject is that just about all of the non-white black people had an understanding that racism existed in that particular profession, and at the same time with those non-white people who basically were placed in a position to whereas they were contracted out, if you will, to practice anti-blackness, that they also had to deal with some of the very same people socially, because I would think that most of us would agree that we are limited on where we stay at, as far as that's concerned. And I'm not sure about what it is now, but I would figure that it hasn't broadened that much further with the numbers that's on the job, because the job is something that kind of like would fill in all of the things that a person would think necessary to be able to be compensated for, and also retirement later on. So of course it's by nature, it's going to be very few non-white black people on it. And it's, like I said, at the same time, you will see that person off duty. And it would be some sort, and with me personally, I have went directly to the person and engaged in conversation by asking questions on as far as the behavior, and normally I got good results. I can't remember a case where if that happened to me that I did not get some sort of constructive reaction from it. Although I would say it probably would exist with a higher positions. In other words, they would have non-white black people actually competing with one another for chief positions, especially the ones that the director may hand out, and that will cause that problem. And I think some of those relationships will be permanently negative, as far as that concerned. But on my level, I don't think I ever had a situation to whereas after conversation, either at work or off duty, and it wasn't necessarily mean in some cases I wasn't even looking for the person, but they'd be at the same place that I'll be at, as far as they're concerned. Everybody's nice then, and then you basically ask the person, well, the question, some sort of situation that they said or did that was made it kind of a job that's already tougher for you. I also was going to say something about one of the callers before you was mentioning about the quote unquote environment where there was a lot of non-white black people at in the profession that I was on. Every now and then that would occur. I do recall white people had a name for it. They called it Soul Patrol, that sort of thing, where it was four people on the fire truck and 3 on the rescue trucks, and sometimes you would have a combination with all of the personnel would be non-white black. I would say at one point in time, myself and several others, Mr. Clark included, we basically had a station like that. We actually orchestrated it over time because we started getting a lot of seniority, and we strategically bid it in. I actually could have bid it into the station before several other guys did, but I chose to stay out so they can get the spot. And then I would come in and bid a spot. So we ended up having a station like that, to whereas we basically was saying, well, these fire stations are located in the areas where non-white black people stay at, and so we're going to have basically an open house type environment in the fire station. So it'd be 2-3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and we would be having meetings, at the fire station, that sort of thing. I wouldn't advise nobody to do this now, but I'm just stating some past history, as far as that's concerned. But one thing I would say about it is that those type of situations under the system of racist white supremacy, they don't last long. They don't last long. White people do pay attention. They do pay attention. If they see something that's being progressive amongst black people, that sort of thing, they'll find some way to dismantle it, that sort of thing. And in a period of time, you bid out and go other places, that sort of thing. But it just, what he was talking about reminded me of that past atmosphere. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. I think we got the switchboard difficulties resolved, at least temporarily. Some of the folks that dialed in more recently with a hand up, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Codified software developer in Wisconsin. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, good evening, Gus. Good evening to the listeners and the callers. So your discussion on blaming other non-white victims for their behavior is timely this evening. I actually had a situation where I was uncodified this week. I was coming off of a weekend where I was a part of a family reunion committee that was working nonstop, and I was very tired on Monday, so that's my excuse. I really don't have an excuse, but anyway, so I was in a co-review with the non-white Indian male that works on my team and the white architect who's always deprecating him. And so previously, heretofore, my thought has always been about the non-white Indian male. He may be engaging in anti-blackness. I don't know. He treat me incorrectly, but he may be engaging in that with these other white people because he's trying to fit in. He's trying to get on this architecture team. He's trying to do everything possible to be a part of this cool crowd, so to speak, quote unquote. And so I've been mindful of that, but I said, again, that anti-blackness is not his fault. This day I was in this code review. I'm incredibly tired, and he and the white male are giggling about something, and I just snapped, and I was just like, "Oh, what are you two doing over there, playing footsie?" And the white male does not respond to me with any rudeness. He responds about the non-white Indian male. He says, "Oh, not yet." And the non-white Indian male looked very angry, which he should. And I was just thinking about that, and I was thinking, after that meeting, I was just thinking how incorrect I was, knowing that he's a victim of white supremacy and knowing that his behavior is informed by the situation that we're in. And so I had to resolve to at least make an amends by changing my behavior towards him after that. Another quick anecdote. I was at work yesterday, and the non-white Indian male and we were talking, and I was looking at my badge, and my badge was broken. And he said, "Oh, it's cracked." And one of the white males, the business analyst at on the team, was like, "Oh, what is that, crack?" And I was like, "Why would you ask that?" "Oh, I just thought I heard." I said, "What would be the logical reason for you asking that?" "Oh, well, I don't know." And then, of course, non-white Indian male tries to come to his defense, and the white male's, "Oh, I don't know why I asked that." I said, fascinating, and then turned away. With that, I will mute my line. Thanks so much for letting me share.
Not that uncodified. Brilliant. We always say that even in the system of white supremacy, if you're not pleased, sometimes we don't give the best effort, or we, would like to have done better, or would like to have done something a little different. Woo! Racists will give you plenty of opportunities to try again. Woo! Great job. But the question that I wanted to ask was, you said you reflected after the incident with the non-white, non-black male and the footsie comment, and you said that you're moving forward, at least going to make amends by changing your behavior towards him. Changing your behavior towards him how?
Just not being so petty, I guess. Not treating him so rudely. Like it was a lapse of judgment. And I was thinking to myself, I had no business doing that. That was incorrect behavior. And so I need to change that incorrect behavior and treat him with the same tolerance and kindness that I would treat another black person, because he is a victim. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, ma'am. I do know that for myself, I was talking about rest earlier today with a victim of white supremacy and the importance of trying to get quality rest. And, it is huge when you don't get enough rest. So days that you're at work, and if you're tired or stressed, unusually tired and or unusually stressed in the system of white supremacy, like really take that into account. Like those might be days where you don't have as much patience, and you might have to amend your code, especially to make sure that, wow, other days I might be really crisp with my questions and this, that, and the other. Today, I'm really tired. I don't have as much patience. I'm going to have to be, maybe I might have to avoid situations. I'm going to have to do a lot of avoiding and just not doing a whole lot of commenting today because, I'm grouchy, especially I'm grouchy every day, but I'm especially grouchy today because I'm tired. Like, I think it's important to know that, hey, we just don't have as much patience as we would. A little tired today. That can greatly impact how we function.
Gus, I'm sorry. One more thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I was going to actually call in on Monday, but I had scheduled the code review, and I felt like it would be incorrect to miss a meeting that I had scheduled. So that was why I was actually at work. But in retrospect, I probably would have taken off. I had taken off Friday. I probably would have taken off Monday as well, just to rest after doing all the work for my family reunion. So thanks. That tip is always greatly appreciated.
Mm-hmm. I can, I felt it in my body on days when I'm at work. And that's something that I probably deserves more time. I think as a non-white person, there are far too many times that I can think of where I was at work, where I was not adequately rested. And given the amount of terrorism that we face on the job, it would probably be in our best interest to try to minimize the number of days that we're going to be on the job where we know, man, I am really tired. Like, I need 7 hours of sleep and, I slept 3 hours last night, or I need 8 hours of sleep and I slept 3 hours last night. Like that used to be me on a regular basis. And I think Thomas in New York has talked about this, like regular, but lots of our listeners, system of white supremacy is major impact of the system of white supremacy is non-white people having really poor quality rest. And I just think for workplace racism especially would probably be more codified for all. I'm just thinking this is something I'd never even thought about before, but just hearing codified software developers commentary and thinking about my own experience, it would probably be better counter-racist code to make sure we minimize the number of days where we are really tired on the job, because I think racists, that's the sort of thing that they can probably exploit. Like, oh, Nigga looks like they were probably up with a little bit of that mad dog or snorting crack cocaine last night, whatever they'll say. Oh yeah, we're going to go to work on them today. We'll get them today. They might be sharp the other days or whatever, but we're going to really go to town with them today. Every nigga joke I can think of and everything I can possibly do to get on their nerves because they are looking a little droopy. That's probably the sort of thing that if all of us are reporting we're under surveillance. We just had a person writing in that said, folks are pretending to have files to look for so they can come and snoop on you. If so many software developer has said the same thing, talking about being under surveillance. If so many of us are reporting that, it would seem logical that they might pick up on that sort of thing. Looking a little tired today? Let's give them a little extra jab, see if we can get something. Might be an important part of our code to adapt. Make sure we are rested as much as possible going on the job. Other folks that we've not heard from at all, if you have a hand up, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Caller in Florida? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Greetings to Gus, the host, the listeners and callers. I think, Gus, was it a question earlier on about my white coworker, and I guess when she had approached me about, her breakup situation.
Right. I think that was Irie, our caller in Louisiana. She was asking about, I think it was almost phrased hypothetically, like asking, why are you telling me this? And saying that I think her code would be to try to flip it back on the white woman to make her feel ashamed for sharing this sort of information. But if Irie, if you're still with us, if you want to rephrase your question, make sure we got it correctly. She might have dropped off, but I know that was exactly what it was pertaining to, the white woman who shared, and she gave, I guess, her response. But yeah, I guess, why was she sharing? Is that what you thought the question was?
Yeah, I did pick up on that part of the broadcast earlier, and my response on that was that there's a strategy that I use because it's rare that situation often occurs where it's just me in there and it's just her in there, usually my black supervisor, departmental supervisors, and the other black female. So I'll go and do one of my other 2 to 3 different tasks in the morning so I can avoid that. Or I'll just basically just say, I don't think that's appropriate to talk about here. And or I will just check my messages. So there's plenty of ways that I could, in the foreseeable future, do to pretty much avoid her in that way. That would be my response to that. But there are a couple of things I wanted to share that I've come across. Number one is we had it was a white person actually today. No, it was yesterday. He was asking me about. Now this is a cowbell because it was a couple coming in to apply for a marriage license because we asked them had they apply online and have they read the handbook for family marriages and stuff like that or whatever. So I had got back from break and he says, hey sir, could you help me out with something? I was like, yeah, what's going on? So, and he says, what would you have to put if you're classified as something? This person is Indian. Okay, so this person's sitting. This is a white person talking to me now, and the person in the seat typing in the application, he has melanin. I guess he was trying to look for the classification Indian. So I was like, well, let's take a look at it because last time I checked it, I don't think that was on there, but it looks like they added Indian and Mexican. I wanted to report that those two have been added to it. So it looks like it's at about 15, 16 different classifications. So he was looking for Indian. So, and he found it and clicked on it, and the female was white. It was a white female, Indian male. So, and it was a white man. He was asking me, what can he? Is there anywhere where he can put if he wants to classify himself as Indian? So we seen it on there, so he clicked on Indian. And I said I was going to ask two people. I was going to ask the black supervisor, and I was going to ask my white supervisor, but she's on break this week, so I can't really talk to her right now. The response I got from the black supervisor was something about the state. I said, well, hey, how do they get these racial classifications on here? Because they keep adding these different ones, and what's the difference between white/black, black/white? She says, well, maybe it could mean something about what the state wants put on there, these states wants put on there, and maybe someone might think that they're more white and less black, and that that they're more black than less white. Then I said, now I asked her, does that make sense to you? She says, not really. And that was a short conversation. And these kind of talks are going on, like, the customers aren't really around. It's before they come in there. And it's 3 black people in there at the time we're talking about this. And she's talking about what they're saying when they come in to have these sessions. And she's saying that she pointed at the lighter point of her palm and saying that they usually like to call themselves white. That's what she was signaling to me. And then we kind of got cut off because another customer came in. So it looks like that's what she was trying to communicate to me. Number 2 was there was a white person that came in a couple of days ago, and she had this long name, and the black female was assisting her with finding a record, and I think it was called Shama Sundari. I can't remember how to spell it, but the black female said, "How do you what does that name even mean?" And now the white woman says it means blue black with great beautiness. It means blue black with great beautiness. That's the definition of the name. But this is a white person, so I'm wondering, how does she get that name? And that was a name I wanted to share on the line right here. And number 3 is there has been it was an event that happened today at 1 p.m. and I printed it off of our site, whatever the commissioner meeting, and it's something called conflict style strategies, and it was held today, and it looks like some people went to it. And there's some things very interesting about this, because it's a picture it's a picture with a rock, paper, and scissors on it, like with a cartoon face on it. And it says, "Can't we all just get along?" Now, if anybody on the line heard of that quote, that comes from, I believe, most famously from, I believe, Rodney King, victim of racism. Like, why would they put this quote on this, flyer? And it reads, workplace conflict is inevitable. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If handled correctly, workplace conflict can lead to better decisions and stronger relationships among coworkers. Unfortunately, too often conflict is not handled correctly, which is where this training comes in. This highly interactive session uses your results from the Thomas Kilman conflict mode instrument to teach participants practical conflict resolution skills that can be applied immediately in or out of the office. And then it reads, specifically, participants will learn to, 1, identify underlying sources of conflict, 2, leverage their individual conflict resolution style strengths and how to recognize and overcome their style weaknesses, 3, recognize and effectively apply the 5 modes of conflict resolution, and 4, apply specific conflict resolution tips and techniques to more effectively resolve workplace conflict. And that was a flyer that I had print out a couple of days ago when I got back on the job. And one last thing is that it looks like they're going to have a diversity and inclusion plan training meeting sometime next week, I think on the 31st. So I've been trying to keep my eye on what's going on around the area. Maybe the warden and maybe some of the other top people might be going to this. And I think they're going to reveal something in the next meeting about it. So, and I know they definitely are waiting to see what my reaction is going to be. It looks like that's the vibe that I'm getting. And that's the only thing I have right now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Wow. They will definitely have that in the newsletter when the diversity and inclusion seminar goes down, probably with pictures of any Negroes in the house in the newsletter. Wow, such a robust offering on a weekly basis with the racial classifications. That's so important. Again, this is not people, at a Mickey Mouse club or at a Sunday school. We're just sitting around and making up classifications just for the fun of it. This is at the courthouse. People are coming in here to get death certificates and marriage certificates and, important documents that they need to conduct business. And this is what we got on the form. White/black and then black/white. You might have come in last week, Indian wasn't on the form. You come in this week, Indian is on the form because the state said so. That is the system of race. I said that at the beginning of the program. There's one race. I said that at the beginning of the program. All that multiracial and everything else is leading you to confusion. I said that with emphasis at the beginning of the broadcast. Coming up again at the courthouse, no less, with this sort of, and she looked you in the face seriously. People would like to know if it's more black, more white, just useful to them. Doesn't make logical sense at all, which tells me that white people are very comfortable looking black people in the face and lying, and I mean just giving total nonsense and having black people have to accept it. And I think that just the system of white supremacy, so many of us, we're not able to tell whites no. We're afraid to tell whites no. We're afraid to question or confront them frequently because they have our lives in their hand. It's not compensatory call in, forgive the metaphor. But that is so important to just critically, did what you just said make any sense at all? Nope. End of conversation. And I still no information about these racial classifications. Where did they come from? Who represents the state to make these decisions about now Indian is going to be on the sheet this here week? We don't have any seminars about the racial. That would be a question to ask too. Do they have any training about the racial classifications and how we get all that filled out and how this section gets updated? Like, that would be great to inquire about as well. Let's see, the portion that was anecdote number 1 was about the racial classifications. The diversity meeting or whenever, that's coming up next. The black female, I think it was a black female who pointed to her hand after you had the conversation about the racial classifications not making sense. I think you said it was a black female or non-white female. She pointed to her hand and said that whites, they always want to think of themselves as white. If I remember correctly, was that it?
Okay, like that one was, we was talking about the Indian thing, of the Indian classification, and she was trying to tell me that when the couples that are classified as Indian, they come into our office, she says when it gets to the race part, they'll most of them like to classify themselves as, and then by this time she's pointing at the lighter point of her palm on melanated people, their palms are lighter. So she was doing that, pointing like with her index finger and saying that they like to say that they're white, but she was like mouthing the syllables and saying that to me.
Got it. Okay. I didn't process it correctly the first time. She was saying that the Indian people, a little less melanin, most of the time they classify as white, and she pointed at the inside of her palm to do so.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
And then I was trying to like phrase it in a way like, hey, because this is important. Like, this is maybe the second time a customer has asked me about racial classifications, and I just want to know if we're going to go over anything about this. Would you happen to know anything about it? And she says, well, no, I haven't been informed about anything. And I said, well, I'm going to ask the supervisor when she gets back.
Outstanding. Continue, because I mean, that is important. That's serious. You got customers coming in asking questions. This is serious form. I mean, we're not supposed to just throw anything down on the form. I mean, we're supposed to take this seriously. Let's get some more, and maybe we can get that explained. White, because somebody might come in and ask about that one day. What am I supposed to say? I don't know. Like, yeah, give me some. I'm representing the state, right? When they say the state, am I a representative of the state when I'm here giving out these documents and helping people fill out the forms? Ask questions. Ask questions. Ask questions. Great to do, and great to just pick up additional information on the job. That's what I meant to say. Irie, who called in, she asked a question for our call in Florida, where she was saying that they didn't train her adequately on the job, and she's been having to do a lot of self-training. I would ask a lot of questions, and if they are doing what our caller in Florida just said, where they're giving you nonsense for answers, just keep asking different whites at the office and see how much information you could pick up. But I would ask lots of questions. Try to pick out at least 2-3 questions a day that you want to ask, get information, and just regularly asking questions, increasing your knowledge about things that are happening in the workplace. Other folk will be waiting on the update, especially waiting on the diversity seminar. Wowee, exciting. Other folks who dialed, if any folks that we missed completely, hand up from any folks that we've not heard from at all.
Have you heard?
Greetings, Ivy.
Excuse me, greetings, Gus, and greetings to all the callers and listeners on the line. Gus, is my line coming through clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because I'm on the rope line, and there's just been a lot of distortion in this line. Codified software developer, not perfect software developer. And I think that, it was awesome how you bounced back and how you regained your composure, and, your next opportunity, you made sure that you were codified, and you even, you recognized what changes you needed to make in your behavior. And I think that's what it's all about, because I think that failure is inevitable, that there's just sometimes where we're just not, no matter what we do, we're not going to get the amount of rest we need to get every single time. We're just not going to be sharp every single time. Our attitudes are not going to be, we're just not going to be prepared every single time. And the idea, I think, is to minimize those situations. And you demonstrated just the desire to be that way, to minimize these situations where the very next time that you had an opportunity to change your behavior, you did. And I think that is that's fantastic, and that is self-respect. I hope for Drapetomania that she can ask for training, since she's not getting any, because that is not cool. And to document all that, just even in any exchanges that she might get in terms of asking for training, and even asking for that electronically, like sending an email or something of that nature, because that just seems very incorrect, that they would expect you to do all this new stuff and not train you properly. For the person who said that they that they can't see the person as a victim who was victimizing them on the job, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, because mistreatment hurts, and that's why you can't see him as a victim, because you're being mistreated by him, and you are, that hurts you. And when you're hurt, it also infuriates you. It makes you mad. And so I understand that. However, even if he is a willing participant, he's still a victim. That's just like if someone had a gun to your head and they told you to hurt somebody. You may be a willing participant in that, but you're still a victim because you're being made to do something. He may not want to do that, but even he just may be doing it because, he's trying to survive. And people talk about doing things for jobs and doing things for checks. Well, what that boils down to is doing things for survival because you need money and you need checks to survive so that you can eat, so you can feed yourself, feed your family. And I just actually recently found out, I believe it was 44% of the people who are homeless actually work. And so, black people, we don't make a living wage. Whereas, white people, they do. So even if they're outside in a cardboard box, they have access to $120,000, meaning that, they collectively make that. And that's their either their net worth or their median wealth. Whereas we don't have that for the most part. If we're out on the street, we're just out on the street and we don't have these extra resources like they do. So, for this person who is mistreating you, and I think that, Gus, he gave some great, suggestions about, just figure out how to navigate that and how to stop the mistreatment. But he is definitely a victim, willing or not, because ultimately what he's doing is he's complying with terrorists who know that, these people, they're not playing out here. They're holding a job to his head, which is the same thing as holding a gun to his head, because they're saying either you're going to live or die. And if you have a job, that determines whether or not you're going to live or die. And I just wanted to quickly ask to the firefighter and anyone else who would be willing to take this position, because most people are not, which is that if you don't want to, because this is the part I haven't figured out, I don't, touch white people, but in certain situations I will because I'm afraid. And what I mean by that is like, for example, when he said when he was going to get his car serviced, I believe it was, in a situation like that, they could do something to your car and, the firefighter doesn't seem to be worried about that. In other situations where I would oblige in that, I would oblige that is when I'm applying for a job and the person who will be in charge of hiring me may want to shake my hand. I would be afraid to not shake their hand because I would be afraid that I wouldn't get the job. And so people who are, I guess, courageous enough to deny, handshaking in those situations, what would you say to tell them that you don't want to shake hands and still be able to maybe get what you want? Because I would love to figure that out, because I would love to just not touch white people under any circumstances. And that's all I had. If I didn't greet everyone, greetings, Gus. Greetings to everyone on the line. Thank you, everyone, and thanks, Gus. I'll mute my line.
Appreciate that. Let's see. Are there any callers? I will get retired firefighters. He can answer your question, and he had a follow-up. Just let me check. Are there any callers that we missed totally? Like anybody that has a hand up that we have not heard from at all? All right. I will assume we nabbed everyone. Retired firefighter, if you wanted to answer Ivy's question and additional commentary you wanted to share, proceed.
Wow, that's a fate that I was actually on another call, and the only part I got of Ivy was the very last, probably about 3 or 4 words that she said. So somebody needs to repeat what was the question.
She was talking about when you shared about being at the hospital or at the when you were getting your car serviced, and you said, "Hey, it's just business. I'm not, here for a handshake and all that touching. Just here to get my car serviced." And she said that she would prefer not to touch whites at all, but she is fearful in certain situations about touching. Like if it was a job, she would think she wouldn't get the job, that sort of thing. So, what would you suggest to deal with, hey, I don't want to be touched in this situation, and getting to that where you can adapt that as a part of your code, even overcoming fear that there might be some retaliation for that stance?
Yes. Ivy and anybody else who wants to, with me, it's kind of like, it's almost like instinct. in a sense. It's almost like instinct. I'm like I said before, by nature itself, I'm not a touchy-feely type of person. I keep my distance from people, even non-white black people. And Ivy may not have heard it. I mentioned, since I did mention about my mother, she would say that the other siblings, they would come right up to her, to get a hug and things of that nature. And I wasn't the type of person. She would have to come to me. And of course, with her, it was acceptable, as far as that's on my behalf, that sort of thing. But that was just my nature. It's hard for me to really explain that. I don't. It's nothing that I know of that was in my background history that, from a psychological standpoint, would make me not want to do it. But that's just the way I am. And but in some case, I can almost sense that whatever it is, it's not really sincere. And I even had that way. I'm around young people all the time, and you around these teenage boys, they be wanting to shake your hand every 5 minutes. And I say it with them. I say it in a funny type of way, but they know I really Coach be meaning what he's saying. Hey, look, stop all that handshaking, man. Did I just say hello to you 5 minutes ago? That's what I'm saying. That's with them. But in the case when you're in a business situation, and it's just pure business. It's not like it's with another non-white person that may be a stranger, but at the same time, by you investing into that person, by willing to recruit their entrepreneurship, and in turn, they know that because they have this business and they're benefiting from other black people, that sort of thing. You probably wouldn't mind shaking that person's hand. But I mean, just total strange white person and whatnot. And you don't have you have proper distance away from them, and they want to come up to you, and you just know it's phony. So what I said to the guy, look, I just want business. I don't want to. I just say it in a nasty way, a mean way. I just want business, to hurry up and get on. I said something. I can't remember exactly what I said, but that's kind of like what said to him. And I figured he understood it. He didn't show any anger, not visibly anyway. As far as they're concerned, because one thing I basically rely on, that white people are not ignorant to our relationship between ourselves as non-white people and white people on this planet. They're not ignorant to it. They know that there's a lot of hostility, and they know primarily they've been at the base of it. And so when a non-white person states that, hey, I know that you're in charge and you are a product of that has more control in this environment than I do, but I have to come to you. So let's just get it over with, type of thing. We don't need to be doing all of this or that. I would dare say, I put it with me personally, I know they understand. And hopefully I made some sense out of that. Hopefully I answered your question, ma'am. That was it?
Thank you.
Oh, right on. She said that.
Okay.
That took care of it.
Okay.
I think we even got Irie in Louisiana, who I think was the one who mentioned about not being trained correctly. But I think we even got Irie in Louisiana back with us as well. Did you want to make sure you got your question asked to our caller in Florida? Let me see. Switchboard is not opening her line correctly. We'll see if we can hopefully get it in the next few seconds, because I did want to make sure if I didn't remember the question correctly, that she was trying to pose to the caller in Florida. I'll make sure we get her in. Let's see. Yes, Irie.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I left and I'm back. I'm sorry about that. Actually, I tuned back in and I heard the question that Ivy had correct about not touching. What I would suggest is lead the dialogue of the conversation with nonverbal cues that let the person know I'm not about to shake your hand. One thing I noticed, like I do watch a good bit of like Korean and Japanese TV shows, and what I notice is when they don't, especially when they don't know the person, they make sure all they do is bow. They show the respect, but they, traditionally just bow to show I respect you at a distance. So if you kind of gesture to the person when you're encountering them, but make sure that you keep your hands like clasped, for instance, and then make sure you end with that, and also maybe even back away a little bit when you're about to disengage from the conversation. That'll also let the person know, hey, I'm not about to shake your hand or hug you or anything else. And then what happened not to me, but I witnessed this personally, was someone attempted to shake a white person's hand, and that white person said, I don't shake hands. So that is also an alternative. You could just be frank and say, I don't shake hands, and let that be it. And, they'll just go forth, one way or another.
Did you have a question for the caller in Florida? Just making sure I didn't get confused about the white woman at the courthouse.
No, I didn't. I didn't have a question. I just wanted to make sure I stated to him, if he was listening, to ask her, why are you asking me this? To throw that back on her and put some shame on her, so she knows not to ask him, sexual questions like that ever again.
Got it. I thought I was remembering that's the way you were saying it was more kind of a hypothetical in terms of what your suggestion would be on dealing with that. I guess I would add, I think in a system of white supremacy, because of the system of white supremacy, a white woman or a white man, it's going to be a very different response if they say, oh, I don't shake hands, as opposed to a nigger saying, oh, I don't shake hands. I think that's a very different response, a very different act because of the system, unless I'm misjudging. Did any final thoughts? Last 60 seconds before we conclude. Anything else folks need to get in before we wrap things up? Caller in Florida. Let's see.
Oh,
you can. Right on. Caller in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. Real quick. I just have an update about my LinkedIn situation, in which people from my job keep on trying to link in with me. This week, I have had at least 3 people from the current position, from the current company that I'm working for, try to link in with me. And one person who just recently left for another job tried to link in with me. So I'm just watching that activity. It's getting very interesting. Just counting how many people are trying to get to my LinkedIn profile. I think I'm going to have to come up with some sort of codified response when people start asking me why I'm not connecting with them on LinkedIn. That's all I had. I'll mute my line.
Another form of electronic surveillance, perhaps. Caller in Florida.
Yes, sir, Gus. I was just going to just briefly comment and said I did get the conversation on recording. I was going to try to piece it up as best as I can if you wanted to hear a portion of it, because it was a part that came out the best of it when my supervisor had asked me about did I think it was intentional that the warden was bringing the truck back late. And that's when I went off to talk about the word fair, because the white man, he was sitting across the desk. And then that's when I had brought that up about whites having a better advantage then I went into talking about fair, and then he was just saying he didn't know anything about that. So I was going to work on that recording if you wanted to hear that.
Absolutely. That's treasure. Counter-racist treasure. Absolutely. That would be great to hear.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. With that, that is our 3 hours. Getting some echo. I reckon if you are on speakerphone, that would. Oh, I don't hear it anymore. Great. Anywho, we should be here tomorrow. A little sad end of Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison. My favorite book, but it has been a hoot. The last few weeks will wrap up tomorrow. I was able to write Dr. Kevorkian several of the questions that listeners presented, or even the question that I had. And he gave follow-up, so I'll read some of his thoughts. Listeners wrote in some final thoughts for the book, but that'll be tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Last session of Invisible Man. Compensatory call-in will be here on Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We will review what's gone down last 7 days. Bill Cosby recommended that he be branded a sexually violent predator. Anywho, we will call that a broadcast. Thanks to everyone for participating. If you wrote in or called in, people listening to the archives, I hope it was worthy of your time and energy. It is summertime. It's been spectacular. Go out, frolic, have fun, soak in the vitamin D, but we are in a system of white supremacy. You still want to be codified. As such, sobriety would still be best under the system of white supremacy. Dr. Welsing, many of the folks that we esteem, they would strongly encourage that we remain sober. Oof. Black female I was chatting it up with today. What did she say? When I see black people who are drinking high, I already know we are not going to be homies because I am not going to be doing any hanging out with people, and that's how they're spending their time. I said, wow, that's what we need more of. Sobriety would be best, especially if you're going to be out and about in a vehicle, if you're going to the beach or whatever your vacation plans happen to be for the summertime. I would encourage being sober and buckled up if you're going to be behind the wheel or if you're going to be a passenger. Race soldiers, they certainly do not vacations in the summertime, badge or no. That's it. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim. Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.